Feeding the monster. I'm full of all sorts of rubbish again today. With my,
I'm glad to hear you got your audio problem fixed, Ben.
Yeah, never mind, Pan. Yeah, those that was streaming last night, Finley from Future Sound Systems and myself, I set up a Eurorack vocal rig just to fix being panned hard left. Someone's got to do it. So we've got PT delay for those that are curious. I've got dry wet. On the 16N fader bank, I have Cloud's pitch shifted monster voice with stereo grains, never mind hard panned left grains. And the EOS reverb from Audio Damage. So I do apologise if, like last night, I rather stupidly continue to just reach over and play with these fade. What I really need is a feed where I've got all of you on it, and I can have Kim and Chris vocal effects along the way and really go to town on just being the fool. But hello, welcome to Feeding the Monster episode 2. This was an idea from Chris Meyer himself, there in the top left on the video, talking about would it be interesting to kind of live stream ambient watch filling up this huge Eurorack system. And as we got to discussing module choices, experience of what led to be in there, the layout, the patching, the power system, realised there's this huge wealth of knowledge to be had from everyone. So that is the Feeding the Monster series, this episode 2 of 4. And Chris, we'll start with you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Very happy.
Good. From last time, I think you're caught up. All the notes and trigger generators and integration is in there for MIDI and things now.
Got them all in. I pretty much screwed them in. I did just use 2 screws per module, just in case I need to move something or to get something out of the way quickly to plug in power behind a module. But yeah, I got everything from last episode plugged up and running right now. No smoke. No smoke. Everything worked.
Leave it just 2 screws. That's the way. Even with Nerlies, that's the way. Is Ben still playing with his toys from yesterday? Yes, Peter Brown in the chat. I'm still playing with my toys. And to be honest, absolutely baking because there's a ton of modular turned on because I didn't have time to just put it in a small case. So unlike Chris's no doubt more efficient power supply, I have several... Well, we can get to that maybe briefly, but I have several probably not that great supplies in terms of efficiency baking me in this room. But we also have Kim with a lovely push-turn-move sign behind you there. Kim is responsible for push-turn-move, and then with Chris, patch and tweak, and pedal crush with Scott from Knobs, which is a great guitar pedal demo channel that I've just binged several times in full, just lovely ambient guitar pedal demos. How are you, Kim?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. I'm a bit scary after your voice intro, but if I'm not delaying this time, everything should be good. We
did have quite the technical issue with the last one. I labelled up the stream, which a friend pointed out that now the first episode says skip to 9 minutes to avoid the technical difficulties. He said I had to just watch the first 9 minutes. Which is also fine, if that's how it makes you feel. We were a good 9 minutes or so until we got rid of this audio delay, and a good 45 minutes before I've kind of found the real gremlin. For anyone that's streaming that's curious, feel free to ping me somewhere. I'm happy to share the kind of back-end experience. But we have, let me pull up the browser. This is what we're effectively going to be looking at today, which is the top left, and a little bit more of actually. I do need to go and scroll.
Yeah, just a little bit of a row down below too.
If I can.
3 rows of sound sources, and if we get to it, some sound modifiers like wave folders. We'll see how well we do. It was an hour till we got to the first module last time. Hopefully we're a little faster this time.
I mean, this is ambitious, but we're going to get right in, and I think it's fine. No one in the chat seems to have said that anything is wrong, and we can all, well, Kim and I can see you in the chat. Hello to those that are in the chat. There's a delay of around 20 seconds from what we're streaming out of a program called OBS to YouTube. So tiny delay, but we'll try and keep up and certainly watch it. A little bit more difficult for Chris, as he's going to be moving over to his rig and away from the screen, but certainly ask Chris questions. We'll be fielding questions as we go. But one thing I wanted to bring up from last time, there was lots of talk, Chris, of you shocking yourself, hurting yourself, scared of the bus bars, the open power system.
Yeah, some people were fearful for my health. Some people were convinced that I was an idiot. One person wanted me to sign over my insurance policies to him before I worked anymore on it. And it is an issue working in cabinets like this. And when I had it on the bench, I was wearing long sleeve shirts and rubber gloves and all that. But I do want to talk briefly, particularly for DIYers, about a couple things to watch out for when you are wiring mains current into a system like this. How do you not kill yourself? And I think one of the things you have there is a classic photo. I have a piece of 70s vintage custom gear to show you how to do it wrong.
Yeah, let me pull this up, and then as we look at this, you can maybe talk us through it, Chris. We can then move to the nice modern power system.
Right. Yeah, this is the power supply out of my Gentle Electric VCAs and things like that. And it has everything bare exposed. It has an old style US plug on it where there's no keying to the prongs, so you could plug it in either way, and all the wiring is exposed, and there's no on-off switch. And you might see in pencil, the person who built it wrote, "Caution, unplug power cord before working in cabinet." That's because, in particular, when you have an AC power cord that's not keyed, you don't know which wire has the live voltage on it. So even though he has a fuse in the cabinet, the fuse could have been on the ground rather than the live. So that was a pretty dangerous way of working. So you can do it wrong.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll move over. I'll full screen you, Chris, as you move in. This is the power system. And in episode 1, we went over this. Skip to around 9 minutes in, if you find the first episode. But yeah, just a quick rundown would be good of the new system as well.
Yeah, I'll do that after I talk a little bit here about the power. I'll just show what we did last time. So the right way to do it is to get a pre-wired plug so you can't screw it up. AC voltage, the mains current, at least in the US, is actually like unbalanced audio. The live wire, the red one inside this case, is what's actually carrying the voltage. The black one, the neutral, is what's going off to earth ground eventually, as is the center prong. When you're using a proper connector like this one, it has been pre-wired so that that switch is on the live feed and the fuse is on the live feed. So when I turn the power off, there is no power inside this cabinet. It is stopped from even entering the cabinet because the switch turned it off and there's nothing on this live wire anymore. People were concerned. I covered this with electric tape anyway, just so people were convinced I'll make it to episode 4 alive. But I wanted to point that out, that if you're DIYing, you really should go over the wiring diagrams for your country to see which is the live wire and put the switch on the live and put the fuse on the live so you don't accidentally have live voltage floating around inside your case.
Yeah. It's not something that I've ever really thought much about. Is it something you've ever thought about with your system, Kim, how you actually power it, or has the solutions you have just worked okay out of the box?
They've worked pretty much out of the box. I've worked with smaller cases, definitely smaller cases than Chris's. But also, I think it's, you have to consider where you're at with your expertise and power and doing all this yourself, I guess. So I'm keen to hear Chris's, recommendations or maybe yours, Ben, in terms of getting started with something like this. When should you go with pre-installed power compared to this project that Chris has taken on here?
Yeah, and we won't dwell too much on power because you went into more detail, Chris, last time, but just zooming across to a bigger view of where we got, you could see one of those big power supplies just there, kind of propped diagonally.
The gold boxes, yeah.
I'll be sure to link the previous episode for people as well, but when I've been thinking of a big case, I kind of just think of going for the tip-top Studio Zeus boards because, well, truth be told, I know Ross Lamond has installed hundreds of them and they've always been fine, and I have them in a smaller case. It adds up to a hell of a price if I start thinking of the several boxes that I have stacked becoming just one huge thing and putting a board in per row or two if it's really a wider case. But why a custom solution, Chris? Is it more efficient, more cost effective, better outcome, more actual power in terms of amps?
Yeah, for me, I was going after the quietest power I could possibly put inside this case. And the ADDAC Monster frame actually came with pretty good power, but I had done a series of posts for my patrons in particular where I tested a whole bunch of different power solutions, different bus boards, different wiring ideas, things like that. And I said, at the end of all these tests, I should go ahead and put my mouth, or at least where my, money is, and say, let's install that inside this case. So it meant putting in the best bus boards I could find, which happened to be the Gene's Modu libs, the low impedance bus boards, wiring everything with 12 gauge marine wire to keep the resistance down as much as possible, and putting linear power supplies inside here, which are the quietest. And I happen to be using a Copion Gold Box A series, and they literally have 1/500th of the noise of a typical mean well switching power supply. So that's a great place to start from. But I wanted to just put everything as low as I could, have ample power. So I have 17 amps on plus 12 now, and 9 amps on minus 12 volts, because I just wanted this case to be as good as I could be. So when I'm recording, I didn't get a buzzkill of hearing noise in my audio and stuff like that.
Yeah, and although these things are expensive, and it's almost annoying to some of us to think, God, I've just spent all this money on something I'm not going to see. But relative to what the value of the case when it's full, I think it's a really worthy investment. And I think you said in the last stream, Chris, about just doing this once and not having to touch it again.
Yeah.
It's stopping that
and
chasing.
Actually, I did have to do it again when I didn't have big enough power supplies, oddly enough. But yeah, the relative price, and these are heart-stopping prices, I admit. I spent about $2,000 US all told on the power in here. But if you look at Modular Grid, this case supposedly has $30,000 of modules in it. And when you balance that out, and you just also think, what's it worth to lose that perfect recording because it had noise on it?
Yeah.
I just want those things to go out of the way so I can concentrate on having fun and making music.
And this is also a work thing. I think that's an important point to make, that modules, music, videos, Patreon, it's work. It runs as a business. It's not, I mean, great if people have hobbies that they can throw so much at as well, but it's work tools, and it's getting these tools right and being an authority on it, truth be told. You're in a position, kind of authoritarian figure, if you like, and certainly on power. I won't pull the actual posts up, but on Patreon as well, there's been some great rundowns of different power systems that you've had, screenshots, audio, all these in-depth real world examples. And I just like that you've got, I'm going to nail this, and then the information.
It had been a mystery. People were treating it as voodoo, and I said, no, I'm an engineer by trade. Let's try to get to the bottom of it and get the voodoo out of here and see what's real and what's not. And even in the last feed, people are going, that can't possibly make a difference. Like, I didn't think it would either, but I measured a difference. So that's why I went this way.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're getting into, just one more time, is the top left section of this case today, which again is sound sources, VCOs, samplers, maybe some wave shaping. So for you, Chris, is there anything that really, Kim, is there anything that really jumps out as, I don't know what that is, that's really nice, I'm not sure about this module? There's a couple for me, but anything jumping out from that setup?
Am I on? Let's see. Okay. Actually, not that much. I'm more curious to hear about Chris's, why Chris chose that, those particular modules. Something like some people have, with the 4MS Spectrum Multiband Resonant Filter, that it has a particular sound to it, So I'm keen to hear more about how Chris actually used these modules, or what are the thoughts behind them.
Yeah.
I think that's the most of it for me.
Yeah, and there's things for me like the AFG from Livewire was my first ever oscillator, so I was really kind of chuffed to see that in there. The DivKid's voice is a really stunning bit of work, as is the Fervor generator from Endorphins. Nice, unique windowing of waveforms on that Dove Audio WTF. There's lots of interesting things in there. A question from the chat though, Chris, just before we fully move on from power. Derek Doherty, I think, apologies if I've said that wrong, said, are the bus bars DIY or one of the two vendors? I guess there's two vendors for power bus bars.
Yeah, I used the ASI ones.
Okay.
I did have to cut them down. They're normally 1 meter long. And the way that the Monster frame is built is the back is not flat. It has a curve to it. So I found a 1/2 meter stretch in the middle that was flat, cut the bus bars down to that size, but then I used the ASI mounting system to hold them off the back and insulate them from the frame, the ASI connectors inside here.
Yeah. And a bus bar, for anyone that is curious, is literally a metal bar that has better resistance for carrying the power as opposed to...
Shaky cam here for a second to show people. Yeah.
Yeah, just a way more efficient method of delivery for the current. Yeah. And they're carrying the plus and minus 12, as you say. That's not mains by any stretch.
Ground, plus 12, minus 12.
Yeah.
And the reason to go with a bus bar is that the bigger the carrier, the lower the resistance. And I've basically found the more you can lower the resistance in your power system, particularly on ground, the quieter it's going to be.
Okay. One quick question. It doesn't have to be the first thing we touch on, but Nico in the chat says, please discuss the Shipman modules, which is something I don't know much about either. I've not used any Shipman gear or not had it here. I maybe twiddled a Shipman knob or two in Schneider's Lad in Berlin a few years ago.
Yeah, I have a Shipman filter. We'll get to that in the next episode on Wednesday. Okay. We're doing filters and VCAs. So Kim's question about the SMR and the Shipman filter, that's Wednesday.
Okay. I didn't really... Yeah, they are the right-hand side of the case. So these episodes we're streaming tonight. We'll then stream 7:30 UK time again Wednesday coming, and again Saturday for the 4th episode, where the case will hopefully be full or very close. People don't have to make a actual kind of decision on where they feel about this just yet, but we did last episode take bids on how many modules will Chris fry by the time we're finished. I went with 1, I think. Kim went with 2. I think it was Schmooster in the chat last time was keeping tabs. So if Schmooster, if you're there, or if anyone wants to take the honour of tallying up who thinks Chris is going to fry modules and how many, have some fun with that. But where would you like to start, Chris? Are you going to start at the top so the modules aren't dangling out by their power cables, or?
I'm going to end up there eventually. For the sake of expediency, I was just laying modules into rails last time. Ones that are down here can lay flat. But up here, they have to defy gravity, so I'm going to have to screw these in while we're working. But I did want to start with how I'm distributing control voltages to all of my sound sources. And this kind of actually answers a question that was in the chat room last time, is how do I do cable management in a system this big? If anyone's seen my portable gigging case, they know I'm really fanatical about cable management in terms of low right-angle cables and tying stuff together and all this jazz. And part of my cable management in this case is just how the modules are laid out, clustering things that I know are going to be patched into each other, and then having a signal flow that goes across the case rather than having to go to extremes. I mean, my first plan for this case was I was going to make 1 row of oscillators and 1 row of filters and 1 row of envelope generators and 1 row of VCAs. And I literally found like I was plugging this oscillator into that filter, driven by this envelope generator. It was like, that's not working. So I'm really focused on clustering things now.
One quick question, and a very good one from David Powlin in the chat. If after putting all those modules in and you still have some noise, Chris, is there any further step that you might be able to take to reduce noise any further?
Yeah, Harry Carey, suicide is one. There's grounding this case physically to some better earth ground than just relying on the earth ground that's running through the conduits of this house. There is a window right there. I could actually run a copper bus bar into a copper stake into the ground out there. And another solution, which ties into what I was talking about earlier, is there is a studio system some people use called balanced power, where they have a huge transformer that takes the unbalanced AC mains and makes it a balanced power, just like balanced plus 4 audio down a cable, for your studio. And that's another way of removing noise in the system.
Okay.
Particularly if it's being induced by other things in your house. Because the bus boards, people are asking, why am I using really high quality bus boards when I have linear power supplies? Only some of the noise comes from the power supplies. A lot of the noise comes from the modules. Mm-hmm. The modules spew out noise and feeds them to other modules. So the reason we're using these really nice bus boards is to drain the noise away from the modules, not to filter out what's coming from the power supplies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. Do you experience any modulars in particular, any type of modulars creating noise in comparison to other types?
Yeah, anything that's blinking an LED is a possible noise source. LCD screens are a real problem with noise. So those are what John Lofvink of Genus Modu would call aggressors. They send noise out. And then there's also what he calls victim modules, the ones that are most likely to take noise in. Any module that's made out of discrete components has no filtering probably built into it. Most integrated circuits for op amps have 60 or 50 hertz filtering built into them. Discrete components don't. VCAs, mic preamps, those are very sensitive as well. Wave folders, which really boost the amplitude, those are victims and tend to receive noise from other modules. But in some of my tests I did for Patreon, I found that even just cycling an envelope generator with no LEDs, just the trigger it was sending out was sending noise down the line. VCOs that blinked LEDs in time with the VCO, those were sending noise out. Then anything with a screen is a possible noise source.
That's interesting. Another question from the chat from Constantine. In honor of Constantine, I have it's mixed in this case, so I'd be booted off their stream, but a bit of whiskey for tonight. They've set a trend of having a drink while streaming. Hello, Constantine. His question was, clustering modules, kind of as a question, doesn't that limit your options as you put yourself in kind of quote corner mentality?
No, because this is the 19th layout of this case.
I'll put the modular grid link in the chat for anyone that wants to have a look.
So I am willing to swap modules out. You know, I'm like putting the modules in here is like hiring my band or hiring my orchestra. And I'm not happy with how one's playing, or if there's another player I'd rather have in here, I'll swap things out.
Ed Random in the chat, how do you measure noise? How are you actually taking noise measurements?
Some people put like high-end oscilloscopes onto the power buses and stuff like that. I believe in measuring it how you're going to record it.
Yeah.
I take the audio output from my modular, or whatever the case is, even if it's a small system, run it into my audio interface that I would have, and then I put a high-quality audio measurement on my laptop computer or whatever, and measure the noise coming out of the audio interface. That tells me what my DAW is going to be recording. And I really look heavily at the spectrographs on those, where are noise spikes and things like that. And people have been on my Patreon channel and seen the Eurorack noise series. You know, it's littered with all of these diagrams of different noise measurements. And I found even things like my laptop, I had to unplug its switching power supply from the mains. Otherwise, the laptop's power supply was putting noise into the system. So it was a matter of just unplugging things until you get down to a zero trace, and start turning things on and see where the noise is coming from.
Yeah. So when you're setting the level of the sound card you've got, of course, as you start boosting preamps and things, you're introducing their own noise and things like that. Are you just setting the level for, say an oscillator straight out, this is a normal 0 dB coming in, and then removing it? Because that to me would be the real world example. Here's a standard patch recording at a normal level coming in. I'm going to remove the actual sound and patch and just see what is left. That would be my kind of real world take on that.
Yeah, and this kind of gets into episode 4 when we talk about mixing. But yeah, I'll set up an oscillator, look at it on my Mordax data scope to make sure it's at least plus or minus 5. Some will go a little higher than that, but let's say plus or minus 5 volts. Plus or minus 10 volts, plus or minus 10 volts, which is typical rail-to-rail for most Eurorack modules. Run that through my audio interface, run it into the audio card, set this for 0 dB, just short of clipping, and that's my reference.
Derek in the chat says, quote, what do you use for the distortion? And then his answer is a Meanwell power supply. I like the comment, but a Meanwell power supply is about $20, so it's the cheapest way to add distortion to your modular system you may ever find. We did have one more question, so let me scroll back up. Dave Peachy said, I should have asked at the time. Not to worry, Dave, it's fine. We can ring back over power briefly before we move on still. Any thoughts on having an external power supply just to feed the plus and minus 12 into the case?
Yeah, 2 thoughts on that, and then we'll actually get on to plugging in modules. The reason we're here. One, it would have made my life easier if my power supplies were outside of this case. Because it's made this case very heavy, and it makes it very warm. And if I could have made it an external power supply that I could put in the closet in the hallway, that would have been far better. However, resistance is your enemy. And the further you get your power supply away from the bus boards, and the more connectors you run it through, the more your resistance is going to go up, and the more the noise is going to go up in your system.
Yep.
So for me to minimize the noise, I had to make as short of a cable run as possible from my bus boards to my power supplies. I said, this is my studio system. Let's treat it that way and go that way. Now, as for my portable case, my live case, I'm actually toying with this really mad idea of trying to get plus and minus 12, or actually plus minus 15, into my portable case, and then just have a little regulator board inside there to filter it out. I think that might be a lower noise and lower profile way of going with my portable case. This is a mad plan. It's going to play out in the next couple months.
Yeah, so feeding the mini monster we'll do over summer. But yeah, you mentioned starting. Where would you like to start? What's going in first from this section?
I'm going to start with how I distribute pitch CVs.
Okay.
Because I have, down at the bottom of this case, sequencers, arpeggiators, keyboard controllers, all that stuff. I have 17 different sound source modules. How do I get the pitch from the modules down there up to the ones up here? And to keep them all in tune, which is the real trick. So I've littered throughout my system, and this is a few years old. Let's see how close I can get here. AJH V scales. These are nice buffered multiples with trim pots on them.
I will pull up.
So that if
I'll pull up their website on that one.
Fantastic, yeah. So if you cannot calibrate your oscillator perfectly, these give you an additional calibration control to change the tracking of your oscillator. So I have one of these per row of oscillators. There we go, and scroll that up a little bit. So that I can take a CV in, distribute it to several oscillators at once, and if necessary, tweak the tracking of them from this one location rather than having to take a module out and recalibrate it and put it back in, etc.
It's a really handy thing because calibrating anything, I've had this question before where people say, I've got, say, MIDI to CV coming in and it's not in tune. And it's like, well, the MIDI to CV calibration could be off. Your power could be off, throwing everything in the system. I've certainly pushed and pulled some cheaper power supplies and things have started to drift. Because if it can't deliver accurate voltages at the power stage, you're not going to get accurate volt per octave and things like that. But also then your calibration of the oscillator could be off. And it's really hard to definitively know where to go. So I think they're really important and useful. Well, they're not important if you don't have a problem. I think it's important to say that. They're not essential if there's no issue. But the ability to quickly distribute voltages, properly buffered, and trim how each one goes out would allow you to have several octaves, several oscillators from several brands and have them all track really well without pulling them out of the case, which is a lovely thing that is often, I think, hard for some people to get, because you still hear a lot, if you want to stack oscillators, you should buy several from the same, several of the same ones, like you would have in a classic synth. That's never been where I've personally favoured stacking sounds, but I've spent time looking after the calibration of them all.
Yeah, I'll spend time after this case is up calibrating all of my oscillators so they all track. Let the case warm up for a half hour, let the modules warm up, and then I will calibrate the ones that have front panel controls, and ones that don't, I'll use the V-scales and hard assign a V-scale channel to a particular oscillator, and just make sure everything tracks so I don't need to worry about it when it comes time to make music. And I can get many different oscillators from many different brands to track. But as you point out, Ben, everything you run through can throw off your tracking. So if you have anything in line, like multiples, whatever, precision adders to do octave offsets, they can all throw it off. So I have to make sure I'm running through the whole system, then I calibrate it. The one other comment I'll make is I love these scales. This is what I have. If I was doing it again, I would probably get a bunch of Clavis Caltrans modules.
Okay.
Because they have the automatic tuning loop in them, and they have encoders to do semitone and active offsets for each of their channels from their front panel. So you can add quick semitone or octave offsets to any oscillator or sound source. I use that in my gigging case, and if I was doing this again, if I didn't already have a bunch of V-scales, I probably would get a bunch of Caltrans modules.
It's interesting. I've not tried that one, but it looks, as you said, having the option to digitally add accurate octaves and semitone transpositions. Switchable quantizing is useful. Portamento on board. Yeah, it looks really useful. We've said this either on air or just off air of the show last time. There's some really clever work from Clavis in lots of his modules.
Yeah, he's sharp. He's a pretty sharp guy. So I'm going to have a V scale, and I'm just going to tack these in quickly so they don't fall out, and also just so I know where my modules are going to go. For each row of oscillators, I'm just going to put this one in here quickly so it doesn't fall out on me while we're doing the other modules.
But Chris, you also had a really good point that you don't have to worry about tuning stuff when you actually want to sit down and make music. So all this preparation so that you don't have to worry about technical stuff when you actually want to just make music with your modular.
Exactly. A lot of this sweating up front that I'm doing is so that I don't have to think about this stuff when I want to make music.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely valid and good point, because I think a lot of people might, fight against that when they have several cases, for example, or change their setup a lot.
Yes.
I think that...
I don't know if you experienced that. But...
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing. It's separating that mindset, isn't it, and creating almost like a tidy work environment, whatever tidy means to you and what you find inspiring. But I know Liam Howlett from The Prodigy would talk about in interviews going back maybe 10 years or so that he used to have sampling Sundays. So when it came to making music, he had these huge banks of things prepared. He'd already gone in, kind of done the EQ he needed to do, trimmed all the levels. Everything was kind of... I don't think it was normalizing to 0 dB, but it was all looked after level-wise. Everything was done, and that was the kind of, I don't need to worry about being creative today. I'm not making music. I'm just organizing, finding sound, preparing for future sessions. And I love that kind of sampling Sunday idea.
Definitely. It's the same as Tom Holkenborg. He said in the interview in Patch and Tweak, actually, he's going down 5 a.m. Sunday mornings, only doing sounds with this modular setup.
So,
and I think maybe that's a tip for some people these days, during these times, to just have some days you don't have to make music. Maybe you just do sounds. Maybe you do technical stuff like Chris. Maybe you do only patching ideas, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point to make, and really nicely mentioned.
It's a good thing if you're not feeling inspired that day. Go get something like that out of the way, and probably by the end of doing it, you're going to be happy with your system, and then you might be inspired to do some work with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mentioning Patch and Tweak, and of course I say that because you're on the stream, but it's something I've been sharing anyway, that there's now a free sample of the free Bukes. Have I said that right? Bukes? Books?
I think it's okay, yeah. It's a bit like Moog and Moog or whatever.
Yeah. Famously, Robert
Bukes.
Moog said that both sides of his family say it differently. Half of the family say Moog and half say Moog, so it's not a European-American thing. It's even split down his family. No. But there is a preview up. You don't need to throw your email, just free download of the free books. That is lovely. Pedal Crush is the most recent book. Lots of examples, creative uses, interviews with designers, lots of eye candy, of course. Patch and Tweak that Chris worked on with Kim, and of course Push Turn Move as well. I will link that in the live chat now, and I will.
I've already done it, Ben. So while you've been browsing,
I forgot I'd given moderator rights, so don't destroy the stream.
So the next thing I'm going to put in the middle of all of these V scales, again, this is part of my patch management, is one of my favorite precision adders. It's a Frap Tools 333. And it's 3 sections. It has 3 inputs that it can sum together. And then those go to 3 buffered outputs. So it's a great way of bringing in, say, a sequencer and then a keyboard or something else to transpose a sequence, have them summed on the left side, and then drive up to 3 oscillators on the output side. And they actually cascade down, so you have 3 into 9 or break them into different sections. So this goes in the middle of all of the voltage distribution for the oscillators as the Grand Central Station to take sequencer in, split out to those oscillators, take sequencer and a keyboard into another one, split out to different oscillators, etc.
Thinking of, it's not in your case there, Chris, but a precision adder and kind of interval switcher that I really love. to the point of I had to get a few of them, even though it's kind of a non-exciting utility that then to me is more exciting. The T43 from Vlad at vpme.de. You've got plus and minus, 2 octaves, 1 octave, 4 semitones, 2 semitones, and a semitone. So it's easy to take the bottom 3 semitone switches and go up a fifth, come back down, go up a fifth, but then down an octave. You can precision add with the C input, either positively or negative, and really accurately add a voltage to that. You've got an A and a B input that will always just precision add, and your sum output. So most of the time, if we've say like clouds where you have a wide ranging pitch knob that goes from -2 octaves to +2 octaves, I have a hard time tuning in just going up 1 octave. So I'll just use this, even without an input or any modulation, and just use it as a very accurate way to pitch shift, which is actually what with my Eurorack vocal rig. Very good. So it's maybe less inputs than some people may need for a precision adder, but you've a ton of musical switching, which is really handy.
Yeah, that's a very
really
well
nice
thought out
too.
module. He did a good job with that.
Yeah, very good. So you're looking like you've got pitch distribution set up.
3 V scales and my 333 precision summer and buffered molt. So now I'm ready to take stuff up from my pitch section, send them out to the oscillators. So I start putting some oscillators in.
Now the first one, how do you choose what goes first for the stream? Is it by logical position in the case? Are you playing favorites? Do you, like I do, love the your first module that you bought and it has to be the first one in? Or you have bins of modules down there, right?
It's very unromantic. I'm doing it ergonomically. I start from the edges in, so I don't cover up the bus board while I'm working.
Yeah.
I need to be able to reach it, and if I have modules go across it, I can't plug in something when it's behind other modules. And also, I drop a lot of screws when I'm screwing modules in, and by filling in the lower rows first, it's more likely they'll bounce out than fall down where the power supplies are.
Yeah, and you definitely want to be avoiding that.
Yeah, someone was saying, how many people are doing soldering, during their stay at home? I said, I'm going to do arc welding with these power supplies.
So, first module, hit us with it. What's going in first?
First module is another utility module, I'm sorry to say. Because I mentioned last time, the way I like to set up my system is I like middle C to be 0 volts.
Yes.
So that anything negative below middle C is a minus voltage, anything above middle C is a positive voltage. That makes it easy for me to do transpositions, to have other modulators adding and subtracting my root note. I find it easier to calibrate oscillators that way when I know middle C is never going to move, it's at 0. But not all oscillators listen to negative voltages. Quite a few oscillators that are based on digital chips inside only work with positive voltages.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've figured out which of my oscillators require strictly positive voltages. I'm putting them all in the same row, and then I'm using another Beast chalkboard to go ahead and boost the voltage up to the positive voltages that they need.
So is this purely a utility that it just sits in place and you don't touch it? Is managing how the system talks to each other? Or do you ride those? Do you perform them? Do you move them like you might do coarse tunings on oscillators themselves?
For this application, it's set and forget. I'm using it to correct what I consider to be a deficiency, of a couple of my oscillators that they can't go negative.
Yeah.
But this is also the reason why I'm excited about maybe moving up to Clavis Caltranses in place of this system, so that I will have the ability to switch semitones and octaves off of an encoder for all of the oscillators.
Yep. Okay.
I guess also that the Beast chalkboard is like mostly used for performance like applications, right?
It
How do you
is.
feel about it, Ben? Maybe.
Yeah, I think that came up maybe in the last stream, didn't it? That we often see Colin Benders riding octave switches, and it tends to be how I really like using Beast chalkboard. I like that it is a rotary switch as opposed to it's still mechanical, but just an up-down normal kind of switch. because it feels somehow that bit more inaccurate, and you get that kind of glitch sometimes, and I like that. I like being able to kind of octave shift slightly ahead or before the note. You could of course maybe sample and hold it, pre-quantizing or something like that, but I like the inaccuracy of it. I like the human touch of a rotary switch.
Okay.
Me too.
I finally have all the utilities in. Now it's time to get to oscillators. And the first one is a really weird choice. A Wisolator EXOS.
Wisolator. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
They're built in very tiny batches by this guy in Germany. All the documentation is in German. I had to run Google Translate on it in the
There you
manual before I even knew what I was going to buy.
This
But-
is interesting. Why this module, Chris?
It's a really cool additive oscillator, additive synthesis oscillator. It groups together the harmonics in very interesting ways. It has some of those quick performance switches, like moving things up a seventh or a 12th, 7 semitones or 12 semitones, a seventh or a 12th. What he calls resonance, but are actually peaking of the strengths of different harmonics. So I just thought it was a very intriguing additive oscillator I wanted to try out. It may not stay in the case, but it struck me as something I was personally interested in because I do like additive synthesis. So I wanted to give this one a try. It is one of the modules that requires positive voltages, so that's why it's going in this particular row. But yeah, there's relatively few until we got the new one from Chaos Devices. Their new one, Odessa, is just amazing. I got this before that, but it's one of the few modules that gave me some nice user interface over additive without taking up a huge amount of HP.
How many partials or harmonics? Can you
Oh,
remember?
I forget. I can't remember. I'd have to retranslate the German
'Cause
manual.
you've got
It says like 64 overtone profiles.
Yeah, it's really
Okay.
it did quite a few. Look at the wiring on the back of this thing.
That's German.
All those precision resistors. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty cool. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I look forward to not today. For anyone wondering, we're not going to get to making patches today. we are a huge case away from making patches, but I look forward to hearing it from you in the future. Definitely.
just make sure I've got this keyed properly before I smoke this module, because this one's going to be really hard to replace.
So maybe, last time we checked up on how you are actually putting voltages into the system. And maybe for those who are new, we should just briefly recap what you're using as a controller keyboard.
Yeah, I happen to be using a Korg Tactile. I liked it because it has a whole bunch of sliders and knobs and buttons and an XY pad and velocity and pitch and mod wheel, but also had a really cool arpeggiator, which had different rhythmic patterns independent of which notes you were playing. So that's the controller keyboard I've chosen for this particular system. I thought it was really handy. I remember now. So it's a good thing I had this cable plugged in ahead of time. It has no marking on it as to where -12 goes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll cross our fingers.
Yeah. So let's hope I'm putting it back the way I took it out. This might be your winning module then.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's it.
Well, I'm off for 2, so I would like to see some action now.
This will get you halfway
When
there.
you screw it in, Constantine said in the chat, please go on modular grid and zoom in to show that all the related racks that are in is all you, Chris. There's this huge list included in 30 racks. Learning modular, learning modular, learning modular, learning modular.
Those are the different iterations of this case as I plan out.
I'm definitely gonna have to check that thing out. I'm very, very curious.
Yeah, I've had very little chance to play with it because I got it right before I tore the case apart. So yeah, I'm curious about that one. I'm curious myself about that one. Okay, the next one is a sentimental choice. Not all this is logic. the Waldorf.
Oh, I've just seen, we were talking about the VMeer auction happening in the UK, which I think will be done by now. There was one of these for about £75, and I don't think it went
That's a
much
steal.
for, which less than $100. I don't think it went anywhere above that. Don't say too much, because I'm going to leave this. You'll see me like staring over into the distance trying to find it again.
The reason I wanted to have this in the case is, for those who don't know, I used to work at companies like Sequential Circuits ages ago, and I actually had quite a hand in the Prophet VS. And while we were working on the Prophet VS, we were trying out other wavetable instruments. And I just loved the sound of the PPG, particularly the 2.2 for me, is what really makes it. So when I started putting this modular together personally, I wanted to have the sound of the PPG inside this case, just because it's a romantic association to something I really love. As it so happens, this oscillator does not sound like a PPG.
No.
It's on the one hand, it's more refined. It does not have the clicking as it changes between wavetables that the old PPGs does. It smooths them out. You can change the smoothing, but it never gets to be as glitchy as the PPG. But on the positive side, it has all sorts of additional tonal control over the harmonic content. So I personally, and you can also scan the wavetables back and forth. I just love the character of this module. I've not gotten into the voice synthesis, but it also has phonemes in it. You can upload words into it. It's very flexible, but it's huge. So,
how's the depth on this one?
It's not bad. It's surface mount, so it's very skiffable.
I heard.
Yeah, that's not a problem
I
at all.
remember Myler Melodies, who was writing for Future Music at the time, review saying that he managed to continually crash the thing with audio rate modulation to the point of really wanting to give up on the thing. And that, to be honest, really kind of tainted me with it. If I don't want something that I'm going to crash and have to turn on and off in the case. Have you had any of that with it?
I have not crashed it.
That's nice to get.
However, that is a good point about digital modules. Digital modules, typically, not all of them, they're getting better, don't respond very well to FM because they're scanning those voltage inputs as opposed to it being a continuous signal. And they typically scan it at a relatively low rate, like maybe just a couple kHz, not at audio rates. So once you start modulating them too fast, you're going to get some weird or aliasing type behavior out of them. This is actually the case with the Strymon Magneto, by the way. If you try to FM its different control voltages. But I haven't had a module crash on me yet. But I kind of know to be careful about FMing digital modules. I'm probably going to be disappointed unless it's some of the newer ones with the faster processors that scan the CV inputs really fast.
Interesting. I've heard some nice things of it being kind of a more mid-range, top-end arpeggiator type thing from the users that I do know that have them. Not so much in the bass region. I don't know if that's just a stylistic choice, artistic choice. But yeah, I found it on Vimeo. I went to go see if it was still available. Someone scored one for £85. If you're in the chat, person that just bought one of these, enjoy it. That's a real steal.
I will say in general, though, and you're bringing up a very interesting point, is why do I have 17 sound sources in this case? Particularly when I said Wednesday, my goal was to get 4 voices out of it. Part of it is variety, so I have different sounding sound sources. But part of it is because I double up almost everything. As you said, I found a lot of modules, particularly digital ones, sound modeling ones, even complex oscillators can often lack that heavy bass that I particularly like. So I'll take many of these fancy oscillators and then just layer in an analog oscillator, an octave underneath it or something like that to give it more heft. So that's how I deal with the bass situation.
Yeah.
That's a good old production tip, right? Layering voices, which I believe some people might forget sometimes in trying to minimize their setups, for example.
Absolutely. You must be layering a lot of the time. Are you layering? You layer live as well, though, Chris, don't you, in the percussion live case?
Yeah, I do a lot of layering. I like to have multiple things going on, just make things thicker. A little bit of detuning, add a little bit of chorusing and motion. I like motion in my sounds. I hate things that freeze at a certain point. But another reason I'm going crazy like this, because I used to have just 2 sections for oscillators, now I have 3, is there's so many really cool plug-in synthesizers to do all this cross-fading between all these disparate sounds, is I wanted to recreate that in my modular by going ahead and having enough modules to create 2 or 3 or 4 interesting voices, and then using something like the verbose scan and pan to crossfade between them, like a lot of the cool plugins do these days.
Yeah, a really nice trick.
Right.
Something that the kind of drum and bass and jungle world have been doing since the late 90s with thick, heavy Reese bass sounds and things. But in new soft synths like Serum that have specific sub-oscillators, you can often bypass everything in the processing chain right to the output stage with like a sine or a triangle. So you can really cleanly pass a sub through, which is something that I regularly do, is to get another oscillator, sync it, get it an octave lower, and then just take that straight out entirely separately. So I'm not trying to re-synthesize or add anything to a bass sound. I would tend to track a sine or a triangle an octave lower, maybe not even use it, but it's there then. There is a sub in the project, and if at any point in the mix you think we need more weight in this bass or a cleaner low end, or it's there. So
cool way. So that's why I have a lot of modules in here. A lot of it so I can go ahead and double and do that reinforcement.
And stereo image as well. If you're starting to pan things around, even having 2 oscillators slightly panned or a slightly folded or filtered version off to one way, starting to create stereo images. I mean, that's a whole other topic of conversation. But
people are getting into that more these days.
Yeah, you often need multiple sources to do that really nicely, or certainly bigger processing chains.
Yeah. Next oscillator. I do like my dirt, but I also like things that are clean. There was a Star Trek episode ages ago, show my age, where there was duplicate Kirk and Spocks, but in the duplicate world, they were savages, barbarians. And they said, it's easier for a refined person to act like a savage than it is for a savage to act like a refined person. So I tend towards cleaner modules because I know I can dirty them up, as opposed to having all dirty modules that I may never be able to clean up if that's what I need on a particular track. So that is a large part of this choice, the 352 by Synthesis Technology. I'm doing this mirror drifting as I'm looking at the display here if I get framed. It is exceptionally clean and well engineered. It has a lot of cool tricks in it. You can glitch it a bit. But when I want something really pure and clean, this is the baby. This is the white side of the yin-yang symbol.
Yeah, absolutely. Cleanest, smoothest morphing wavetables I think I've heard anywhere. And it was the E350 before the E352 came out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
With the kind of music you perform, Kim, do you get into wavetables much?
I've actually recently been doing it, and for some of the same reasons that you both mentioned, being able to varying the timbre of a sound is maybe not by cross-fading or fading between different oscillators, but simply just scanning the wavetables. Actually, one of the modules that Chris has here, like the Erica Synths Black Wavetable VCO, I particularly like that because it also has the sub octave output. So yeah, that's in ambient music. It's like you want to have stuff keep going and keep growing and evolving.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah. I love scanning wavetables. That's a large part of the sound I go for.
Absolutely, and having modulation and of sound be right at that sound source as well as downstream. There's no reason still not to use filters, folders, distortions, processors, effects, but have points of animation right across the signal chain is a really beautiful thing. Mentioning it being clean, Chris, the wave folder mode on there, the wave morph and fold on the E352 I find is nice for adding a bit of edge without having to go out of the module itself.
Yeah, how controversial do you want to get?
I know you've other folders that you like better than that one.
Yeah, I love the 352, and I think Paul Schreiber is definitely one of the most brilliant engineers in the Eurorack world. I'm disappointed in the wave folder in the 352. If we have time, we're going to get to my wave folder row, but in general, wave folders were originally designed to take low harmonic content waves and add harmonics.
Yeah.
Well, when you have digital oscillators or complex oscillators, you already have a lot of harmonics. So a traditional wave folder is going to just turn it into hash pretty quickly. So I think there's a lot of room for more thoughtful wave folder design to work with complex waves. And I think the 352 is a little bit more conventional of a wave folder than necessarily one that took this into account. And that's one of my beefs with Paul. And Paul and I spar all the time, so this is just another one of our beefs.
I'd agree. The folder in there was very nice on the soft harmonic content waves, or nicer than it is on the more harmonic content ones, and maybe consideration could have been put in for that. But still, standing by what I said, it's a nice way on the module to go, let's just add some grit. And then that works across the range of the thing anyway.
Yeah.
Quantum Space in the chat says, it's funny to see how many people are here and also over at Colin Bender's broadcast at the same time. Oh, he says he's talking. So I responded to say that I wonder how well we sound, how good we sound talking over Colin's beats. But unfortunately, Colin's talking at the moment. Maybe that's the way we get through. It's like trying to game the Spotify royalty system, isn't it? Everybody just opens every live stream going and just walks away from all of them.
Well, yeah, you could pipe him in to be background music.
Yeah, get Colin to call in. He can. I've got the.
No, don't tell him. Just do it.
Well, we could get some of your music, Chris. Do you have anything on Bandcamp or anywhere else out now?
I have a little bit of stuff on SoundCloud. One of this year's projects is to finally get a Bandcamp page up for my musical name Alias Zone. Before coronavirus canceled a lot of my travel, I had a lot of great collaborations going on with people, including Jill Fraser and Richard Bugg back in LA and several other people. And I was very excited about where that was going. So I really wanted to get a Bandcamp page going this year, showing all these different collaborations in addition to my solo music. But the travel obviously is going to have to wait. And I've been busy doing other things. So, but yeah, that's going to happen. Look for Alias Zone eventually.
Mm.
Shall we get back to modules?
Yeah.
So I mentioned that I thought the 352 was kind of like the white side of the yin-yang symbol. I need a black side, therefore, to offset it. And for now, that's the Erica wavetable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has a bit of a grittier character. It has that sub-octave. It might eventually get replaced with a piston Honda. I love the piston Honda, particularly the Mark III.
I have
that
one.
does have a really great rough sound, and it has some of the Prophet VS waves in it. So, but this is in here for now.
I have one.
I can't do with these.
Sorry, Kim, go ahead.
No, I'm just those orange knobs. I can't do with that stuff.
You can change them, pull them off.
Borrow your daughter's fingernail polish and go in and redo them.
Good point.
I was butting in with excitement. I do apologise, but I have one in customs. A parcel from a Scott Yeager that I just paid the customs on. And being Easter, it'll be Tuesday that will arrive. Very much looking forward to playing with that. Thinking of Harvest Man, because I know he uses it, Phil Bilsby, Ebsidic. It's funny to see him talking about changing knobs and pulling them off. So he doesn't knock any tuning knobs live. He does just pull them off. They're just bare pots. So if he's going kind of wild on the things he wants to play with, it's like, I don't want to move the coarse tune. I've tuned it before the gig. I've checked it. It's fine. The knob is coming off.
That's really funny.
Wow.
That's a lot of faith and not drifting.
I mean, you can still grab a pot. It's not impossible. Mainly digital, to be fair. So I think the drift is less of an issue. Potentially.
That said, I have one of those DIY build microgrids in my gigging case, and it will drift a quarter tone from power up till the gig starts.
Okay. Interesting.
That one always gives me headaches. Like, and now let's bring up the second voice. It's a quarter tone off. Like, oh god.
It could have been a fifth. Instead. So, I mean, the further generator, the knobs on those, the big knobs on the oscillator there, but you don't have that in your live case. But those are very, easy to bump into, and they're very loose. Some people have kind of modified them.
You feel like going down another technical rabbit hole?
No, let's keep it.
Kim and Chris, we were saying they're like an old married couple after writing Patch and Tweak together.
He knows how much sugar I use in my coffee.
So someday when we have time, ask me about why some oscillators are harder to tune from the front panel knobs than others. Anyway.
Will do.
So shall we power it on and see if anything smokes?
Yeah, if that's
cross
a
our
row of
fingers.
sources, yeah, let's go for it.
It's looking good. Oh, look, I even got an LED on this one.
Have you never seen that?
So-
Is this so new you've never seen it?
No, well,
First light.
I have. If that LED had not come on, and if instead I started smelling something, then I knew I got the power backwards. But yeah, that row worked.
Looking good. I'm wondering if I'm the only one here wanting to buy every module after Chris explains something about it. Maybe some people in the chat are seeing their money flow
Well,
out.
that's the opposite side of it. Is I have people ask me to recommend modules, and they think if I don't have it, it must be bad. And go on Modular Grid, pick VCOs, and see how many choices pop up.
Yeah.
You're not going to fit that into any case. You cannot have every VCO. So yeah, this comes down to aesthetics. Your personal judgment.
But also, I mean, this is one of the groups of, sound sources is what people believe they need the most of sometimes when they start out in modular, right? And then you get stuff like people say you can never have too many VCAs, or it's all about modulation and stuff. So how would you say your case is balanced, Chris? And, it's 1/4 of VCOs roughly, or how is that?
Yeah, I have 17 sound sources. I have roughly 20 filters. This entire row, whoops, I'm a little bit below the camera. Let me pan down a little bit. This entire row will be modulation sources. Random sources, envelope generators, etc. And then I do have a selection of VCAs, but I mainly have picked VCAs that either are very compact or that have a lot of character, and we'll get to that in the next broadcast. So I'm heavy on VCOs and filters.
Yeah.
Just so I can get different timbres. That's very important to me.
But it's like when you see maybe a band that you love growing up, or that you loved growing up, you start getting into the gear that they use, and you find that they always play like a Les Paul on stage. But then you look at the recording, or there's some making of, or documentary, or images somewhere, and it's like, hey, he's got a Telecaster in the studio. What's he doing? And it's that kind of right tool for the right job. And in a studio case, you have that luxury potentially of, you know what, this is, like you said, you've got an E352, which will do nearly all the wavetable things you could ever want. There's an NW1 and the Erica. Any one would be fine if you were making choices for a live case.
Definitely.
Largely.
Or smaller case, or starter case.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate that I can indulge my taste of collecting different timbres. And that's what it is for me, is I don't collect all of one brand or something like that. Each of these have a different character. Each one is fine on its own. But for this big studio case, I have chosen ones that have 3 distinctly different characters, so I can go ahead and get to that next layer of subtlety when I'm making a patch.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself sampling sounds off the studio system and putting into your gigging case?
I have not done that yet, but I attended a really nice talk by Steve Roach the morning after he gave a concert in Phoenix, where he explained his live system. And on the one hand, he does have a few voices going live on the modulars, and then he has additional sequence voices going on his Nord modulars. But then he has additional sequences that he recorded in the studio, put on tracks in Ableton Live. And then he has a huge mixing console that is his nerve center when he's performing, and he'll bring all of those stems, live, virtual, pre-recorded, in and out. And that's gotten me thinking, where before I've been very much like, oh, how can I get enough richness or density out of my small travel case? That might be the cheat I end up doing down the road.
Yeah.
I'm just watching the live chat as we go. Jeff, mastering, saying patch and tweaks been really helpful. Absolutely love that thing. You both did a very good job on that. Arman Roman Pojo, again, apologies if I've said that wrong, says some modules have no equivalent VCV modules. Someone earlier said that they test. My videos came up, Chris, as did yours, that people, that you watch a video, you want to buy it. and it came up that they test what they may be able to do in VCV rack. But where there isn't an equivalent, it's nice to look at the bare bones functions, and it's certainly something I aim to do, and also something I definitely get from watching your videos, Chris, that if I can understand the functions, I can try and remake it. There may not be an equivalent, but it can be done.
And that was the intent of the approach Kim and I took in Patch and Tweak, is we did not want it to make about a collection of modules. We wanted it to be about a collection of possibilities, and then for you to look for if that possibility was in the module you were considering buying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, before Oct existed, it took me 9 to 10 modules to do it in hardware, or you could build it out of several in VCV rack, or like 2 batumis and some way of distributing voltage, like a macro from Future Sound Systems or the ADDAC VC transitions. I definitely try and almost prototype with existing things, be it software or hardware, to bring ideas to life. And sometimes you realize, absolutely, I do need that thing that I nearly hit buy on. They're right, that is the way to do it, or this is right for me. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you try it and you're like, actually, I can get there. We're talking about...
Now, Kim, you're a person who uses VCV rack plus a physical modular in combination.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly the beauty of it, I think, that you can have. That's what I recommend beginners. You can have all the mutable instruments, almost all of them, the modules, just to start with. That would cost you thousands. So just starting out and see what works, what do you like, and then go invest in the real hardware afterwards. I don't have marbles, for example, but actually I like it and I'm exploring it. But that's in the virtual world, just sending CV to my rack.
Love marbles.
And also you could... I've really come around to that being an essential module for me too. But also, I guess in the case where something's not in VCV rack, that's what you buy the hardware for. And if it is in VCV rack, you can use the software version. Exactly.
Or if you have a limited case, like a gigging case, you can have some of all the voltage stuff going on. You can have that from the computer. So there's many options, many ways of combining it and doing a nice hybrid setup, I think.
Yeah, particularly you who travel quite a bit when you go play, like when you played out in, was it Black Mountain last year? There's only so much gear you can bring, so a hybrid setup makes it easier to bring more stuff with you, because some of it's virtual.
Exactly, and you can use like something like a scope. You can use that on the computer screen and bring it up in a workshop or whatever. That's very helpful.
Just watching the live chat still, Ed Random says that VCV introduces a lot of latency. Are you getting around that, Kim, in the musical choices that you make in terms of performing ambient music? Is it less relevant to actually be in time?
Yeah. Actually, I like not being in time, so to speak. And also, when it's slower, sometimes there are sequences and whatever, and I'm very careful about what I choose to have going on in the modular system and what's actually coming from the computer. And I'm trying to keep it as low latency as possible usually without any audio from the computer, only like BC signals.
I know of, just to give a tease of what's to come, a very little tease, I'm not going to say any about who they are, but 2 very good artists, very interesting artists that I think lots of people watching are interested in, are looking to do a live stream performance together from 2 different countries, and they're taking it as simply as, if they're doing beats and rhythm, I'm going to do washy ambience and texture and get out of their way, and vice versa. They'll take the audible cue of, it really doesn't matter if I'm in time, because we're not going to try and layer rhythmic beats together. There's no stepping on toes in terms of sync. I know Nigel Mullaney, who maybe I saw it popped up somewhere, maybe it was a background window that I've got open. Nigel Mullaney and Dan Welbeck from DPW managed to jam in time over Ecamm Live, it might have been some kind of chat streamy software they were using, and he just messaging me like, we were in time, we were on beat. Dan started with
there's a
beat.
piece of software called Jam Kazam, who's trying to make a platform that's supposed to be very low latency for musicians to jam remotely.
Quantum Space says Colin and Heimbach. No, I mean there may be, I may be wrong, but that's not who I'm talking about doing that collab. I know Dan and Nigel. Dan started with a beat, and I think Nigel tap tempoed in and was having to occasionally nudge a little bit, almost like turntable DJ style, to give the record that little push, just to keep it in every few bars. But they were very happy. So where do we go next? We've still got 3 more roles. We're doing
Yeah, we're gonna do some more rows of oscillators, and I have kind of been thematic with the oscillators. One row are the heavily digital oscillators. This top row is gonna be the heavily analog oscillators, and then I've saving this row for the oddballs, the misfits, the ones that don't quite fall into one category or the other, or that there wasn't room for. And in between the oscillators are where my Waveshapers, some additional VCAs and stuff are. And I'm going to do that at the end of today if we get to it. But that's why, again, it's part of my cable management is having a couple rows of oscillators collapse in towards Waveshapers or mixers before going out to the filter section. That's a way of keeping my runs short. It's just thinking about who's interleaved with who.
Wow, very thoughtful.
I can pull the modular grid up and share that one more time for everyone as well. That's in the chat for those that are curious where we're actually going with this. And for anyone that's joined...
Meanwhile, I'll just give a little tease.
That's what's going in next.
It matches the power supply.
Yeah, acropian yellow. The official colour on the Dulux colour chart. This is where we're ultimately going. This is a series of 4 live streams, episode 2 today, of Feeding the Monster. Nice title, but it is a monster case from ADDAC system at the core, the kind of initial frame. And it's filling today's sound sources. So there are other things in here that came up, like a Shipman filter, the SMR from 4MS. We'll come to filters next time. But we're currently working through VCOs, possibly some shapers, maybe samplers if we get there. But yeah, next you held up the further generator, which is a really lovely piece of kit.
I'm going to work on my other row next. And one thing I definitely want in the case is a good complex oscillator. And I came very much from an East Coast approach. You know, that's what I did when I was younger. That's all I was familiar with when I was younger. And honestly, it's only when I got back into modulars that I even started playing around with a West Coast approach to things. And I like it. I do a lot of plucky stuff now. So I always want to have one good complex oscillator in this case. Which one that is rotates in and out. There's been a verbose in here. There's been a DPO in here. There might be a Brenso in the future. But for now, this is it. And part of the reason I like this is I do have the strong core through zero oscillator in this. I'm of the school where I do like plucky FM stuff, where there's a transient of something FMing another oscillator, but I want it to be tonal. So I kind of insist that any of my complex oscillators are capable of through zero linear FM.
Yeah.
That's the only way that I know it's going to stay in tune regardless of what note I'm playing. If it's just linear FM, the higher stuff will be okay. Lower notes or deep modulation might go out of tune. Through zero will stay in tune. So that's why I really like the Endorphins further right now. Is not only does it have a lot of character to it, and it is very much a hybrid digital analog machine, it does through zero FM, so I can go ahead and be extreme with it and it'll stay in tune.
As you start screwing that in, Magna in the chat says, Colin is all music now and making the perfect background music. So I'm only going to fade some speakers up. It's not going to sound great, but let's just see where...
Awesome. Go for it while I try to screw this thing in.
And I've got the vocal effects as well.
Yes, you could...
Yeah. Colin Benders every single day.
I think you've missed your calling, Ben. You should be one of those Sunday announcers on the radio.
I don't know the episode, but I know the Family Guy wacky inflatable flailing arms man. Wacky inflatable flaming arms man. That's a good one that I see sent around. Streaming a stream. Yeah, Kim, exactly.
Yes, meta stuff.
The E352 does through zero linear FM too. Mark Schoen said.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a two.
That was one of the goals on Kickstarter that I was very happy to achieved, because I'll tell you a story. I gave Paul hell about it early on. I said, if it's through zero, Paul, I'm not interested. And he said, I'll make you a deal. If it gets up to, I forget what it was, 500 modules, I'll do it. So I started hyping it online, and he hit it, and he cursed me out. But then he installed it, so there.
Yeah, great.
So Chris, I'm curious about how you're using the extra CVNs beside the key ends. Are you using that for octave shifts or whatever? Because I have the further generator too, and I just love it for those, you can make these evolving sounds, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
has so many harmonic possibilities.
Yeah. I've occasionally used the additional CVNs just to cross-patch the oscillator in interesting ways to thwart the settings on the back of the module, because he does have some settings on the back, whether or not it's exponential or linear and things like that. But if I want to override the stuff on the back, I can patch directly in the front to get around that.
Yeah. So what about you, Ben? Any patching tips for the generator?
I love the thing. Stepped random into everything. No, or step voltages into everything. I really like having accents random that is very heavily attenuated, so it's like some kind of humanization as opposed to typical sample and hold going wild that we've heard from all the synth records. LFOs to everything.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, LFOs to things. Not to just pitch oct. I mean, if you've got a Batumi, an octo controller, Pamela's new workout, or lots of separate LFOs, just having things free running, making the thing live and breathe on its own, that doesn't all have to be in time. I mean, stepped voltages I would want in time with my musical information, but anything that's smooth, a rough rate control, and I'm fine. And I always think of that as kind of the vintage synths I've had. I've never really worried or concerned myself for timing the LFO that does the pulse width modulation on like an old Roland synth or something. Just kind of, get it moving, sounds great, thick and slow or fast and exciting, and just move on. So I like, just lots of modulation.
Yeah, I like lots of modulation and motion. That's a big thing for me as well. So the next oscillator is a bit odd. Dove Audio wave plane oscillator. I'll bring it up close.
I'll pull the browser up in a second as well.
Yeah. This is a very limited run. And again, this is me being somewhat nostalgic. It's the closest I've seen to having vector synthesis in a modular system. I mean, you could patch vector, but vector is not just having 4 oscillators. It's about having a quad panner in between 4 oscillators in the corners. So you can set up 4 different tones you like and then smoothly go between them. So many other wavetable oscillators make their own arrangement of waves that you have to go through to get from point A to point B, unless you go create your own custom tables and wave edit or whatever. I always like the vector approach where you chose the 4 sounds you liked and then you went between them. And the wave plane is the one oscillator that will do that for me in a single module. You could get like a Flame 4-Vox and put it into an IntelliGel planar and do something very similar. But that, and I also wanted to back what Dove was doing.
Yep.
Nice. This is a British module, right? From Paula Maddox, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah, from Paula.
Yes.
Yeah. She had the WTF, the window transform function, which worked like I'll pull across. You can see me a bit better. Almost, the way she explained it to me before I'd seen it was, imagine you have shutters on your window. There's a waveform outside the window. There's a waveform in the window. And how much of it comes through is how far these shutters are open. So you can have a perfect ramp where you're starting to open it, and the slight bit of noise or sine or whatever other wave there, and you could morph between the two and also open and close that window, as it were, which is really interesting. But then the wave plane, as Chris said, to have, I think the Hydra synth works this way in its wave tables. Instead of having big tables of waves, you are choosing a few to move and morph and mutate between.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't want to in any way blow this out of proportion. I had a teensy amount of influence really early on in the Hydra. So I voiced some opinions like that. And if you go through the Hydra, you'll see some waveforms called Chris M with a number after them.
Yeah.
That they're actually taken from the Prophet VS. And I probably didn't do those waves that have my name on them because it was a joint effort and sequential. All of us were making waves. But Glenn Darcy decided to give me credit, so.
Yeah, very nice. Glenn seems like a real dude. I've never met him in person, but he seems like a really cool guy when we spoke online.
Yeah, Glenn's a very cool guy. He's also, don't try to stereotype him. He's a very different type of person.
It was very nice when we did the interview when he was at Arturia for Push Turn Move.
Yeah.
It was a really in-depth, got to see the prototypes of the Arturia beat step and stuff like that.
Yeah, Glenn's very good at acting civilized when he wants to. He can also get thoroughly, insanely crazy as well. He's just a real Coltrane type sax player if he wants to be. He's a really interesting guy.
Like the Hydrasynth. I mean, the Hydrasynth is really, it's been making quite some noise this year.
Yeah, I'm impressed by it. If I got back into normal keyboards, that and a Quantum would be high on the list.
And it has CV in and outputs, doesn't it? Or is it only inputs? I'm not sure.
I think is it a small amount out, the keyboard maybe? Almost like a MIDI to CV type thing, but then more on the way in. That you can route through the synthesis, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyone that knows more about the Hydrasynth than us in the chat, do let us know. There was a stream, which I will find.
Yeah.
B1 report,
And it has like two mod inputs, and it seems like it has 2, 4, 5 outputs, like a clock and pitch gate, mod 1 and mod 2.
Okay. They're actually live now. I'm heading over to Beat People to say,
cool.
hey, we're live too. Hey, we're live too.
And we had a question
Hope
for
you're
you.
having a good time. We had a question. I'm not going to listen to them and try and get into some
while you're
kind
waiting
of
for that to come back.
stream of a stream. But
I did want to point out a couple of idiosyncrasies of the wave plane. One, it requires plus 5 volts. When I first put it in the system, it didn't come up, and I just thought, oh my God, I fried this very rare module. And it just needed 5 volts, and I have only plus minus 12 in this case. So that was a case where I had to put another clavis no drain to create 5 volts just for this bus board because it had one module on that row that needed it. The other thing is I've been playing around with these heavy-duty power cables from Modular ADDAC. Now, when I did noise tests, I was unable to measure any improvement in noise. But again, Paul Schreiber at Synthesis Technology, who is a noise guru, a power supply guru, said, if you're getting over 100 milliamps of power draw from a module, you might consider going to the heavier gauge wire, So for modules that draw over 100, like the Endorphins further generator and like the wave plane, I went ahead and switched it out to a Modular ADDAC cable just because.
yeah, I'm going to find those Modular ADDAC premium cables. We are getting a hello to this chat room from the chat room from the B-Boy Tech Report stream. We're not going to try and merge the streams. But yeah,
do not cross the beams.
We also got a hello from Omri Cohen, who did the patch and tweak VCV rack patches.
Oh, cool.
Which are to be found online on patchandtweak.com. Those were a great piece of work, Omri. Thanks for that.
Yeah, Omri does a great job. Some really nice videos as well. Hardware and VCV rack.
Yeah, and really shows the flow where you can go from software and then into the hardware side of things.
Yeah. Just to bring the bus boards back, the cable, sorry, Chris, as I've pulled the image up now.
Yeah.
So it really is a case of there's no real measurable difference, but in theory these are better, and because it's no real expense added.
Yeah, they're not outrageously more expensive than a normal ribbon cable, and I think of your power wires as like you do a fuse. The idea of a fuse is they're fine passing small amounts of current, but the more current you pass, the hotter they get till eventually they fry. It's the same reason of why you put heavier gauge wire for your speakers, for your big power AC equipment.
Yeah.
I'm just carrying that theory over to this. Well, I need to drag more current. Let's give it a heavier wire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
All right. We're going to go from a couple weird ones to something I think a lot of people have. Plats.
Yeah, there we go. That is in VCV, right? Is Platts in VCV now?
I wouldn't be surprised. Kim, do you know?
You're muted, Kim. I think you've muted yourself as you type, maybe.
Oh, I DivKid muted myself. Oh, not that. Well, I don't have Platts, but I have the old braids, which is still
I have a micro braids in my gigging case, and I have Platts in this case. To get everything out of Platts does require a bit of thought because she's done some really interesting work in terms of some doubled up functions, and it's actually low pass gates and software built into this that you can access after the voices if you want to. So because this is a more thoughtful module or a more thought required module, that's why it's going in the studio case. That's where I'm slowing down and I can think about how to exploit something.
Yeah.
Braids is, I find to be more immediate. I'm just using the stock firmware. That's why it's in the gigging case, because I just dial an algorithm. I have a couple CVNs, let's go.
Yeah.
So that's why there's that division between these two.
I think they're still in Richard Devine's live case, 3 of them with 3 WMD and SSF 4 HP filters strapped to them. So there's a filter per braid and 3 voices of that. I think that's been in that system for a long, long time.
But he's probably using the meta mode a lot, right? To get that glitchy stuff going on.
I'm not sure. You'd get fairly close that way early on, but I wonder if there's enough going on that he's meta moding the whole system. Being Richard, I would imagine so. VCOs does have Platts for anyone that's curious.
Yeah.
Thanks to those in the
Probably
chat that said
sense,
so. Yeah. How mutable stop the production of Platts, one of the most useful modules. Platts is still in production. Braids is discontinued. Clouds is discontinued. Peaks is discontinued. Edges is discontinued. Head to mutableiinstruments.net, I think the site is. They still list their discontinued modules. But a lot of them...
But Emily's still making all the new recent stuff. Even though she's paused work on the new clouds, she's still manufacturing the other modules. I know people panicked a little bit that she had stopped everything. That's not entirely true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I must admit, I still love some of my old Mutable Instruments modules. Those were some of the first ones I got, and I think those are a great starting point to explore the possibilities of modular. Though you have a bit of maybe knob tweaking to get certain settings, presets.
But they're very well thought out modules.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember.
And you can get a lot out of them.
Yeah, I remember Braids releasing, and it was the summer where me and my partner were on holiday in Berlin. So went to Schneidersladen for the first time. Braids was supposed to release. I went on the first day of the holiday, and then sort of 2 days after and 2 days after again, trying to beg Schneiders to, if one comes in, please just hold it for me. No idea who I was, just some random person, clearly not from Berlin, trying to get a module that's going to be hard to get and probably sold out. But then I did go over to LA and the West Coast only a couple of weeks later. Same thing at Analog Haven until the last day of the holiday. He had one and he'd held it for me. And very nicely held it, Sean at Analog Haven, when I said, he said,
Sean will do
you can
that.
pay for that now if you want, and yeah, we'll hold it. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to goose the system of me buying it in the USA and not having anything to do with it while I'm in England. Can I not give you anything? I'll see you when I get there. And yeah, he did. And I left with some other things as well. I think he was very happy. But I was very happy that summer when Braids came back. Only to be, not ultimately forever, but slightly disappointed it's a lower output than other oscillators. I do notice it in patching sometimes.
Yeah, and that gets into something, particularly when I get into mixers and utility mixers, is I highly value mixers that can add gain to a signal, because some modules are just quiet, particularly ones that are built to Surge or Buchla recreation standards. Those tend to be more line or audio level than modular level. And as you say, in the case of this, sometimes you just want to boost it. I think she did that so that she had headroom for the transient stuff, but yeah, it needs a boost sometimes.
So, Chris, there's a question if you're not using plastic washers when you're screwing in the modules.
I am using plastic washers. This came up last time too.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure a way to condense my answer. I personally don't care if there's rack rash. The condition of a module does tell me how much the owner cared in general.
Yeah.
So that is a consideration. But I look in general as I use washers for the next person who's going to own the module. It's not necessarily for me. I don't care. But it's for the next person gets something that's a bit better.
Yeah, it's a good point that if it's absolutely trashed with rack rash around it, it's a good indication of how it's generally been treated as a piece of equipment, what kind of experience the poor thing's had.
Yes. someone's like, I think it was unfortunately someone's widow was trying to sell this person's modular that they had found in the garage. And she didn't know any better, so she's trying to rep it as he kept good care of it. It's perfect. And everyone's looking like the washers were rusted and all this other stuff, and said,
No.
Anyway, next one in this line. This is probably the one that I had trouble figuring out where to put it in the case, and that's rings. I do like rings. I'm using rings in my live case quite a bit. And that's because I don't use its internal noise generator. I always patch something else through it. So I treat rings more as a resonator than necessarily a sound source. And when we get to the next cast, you'll see I have a whole row that's dedicated to resonator type filters. I almost put it up there, but this is one of those very rare cases where I broke my own rule and said, look, there's a mutable module right here. This makes as much sense here as anywhere else. Let's just put it in this row.
Yeah.
And again, over 100 milliamps, heavy duty power.
Yeah, I know that our Benny Austin often gets asked where his long, bold, string-like sounds are coming from. Says it's rings, and everyone goes, "No, rings is that like plucked thing that everybody does, and runs into clouds, ha ha ha." And he's like, "Not if you use it as a resonator as intended." I was very guilty when I did the demo for that, which was ready before the release. I sent it to Emily, and she said, "You've only really used the input a couple of times. Play around a little more." She's totally great to work with the video, but I sent it kind of for feedback, and it was, explore some more of this. And it was rewarding, and all then made it into the video. It's definitely underrated because it's almost a victim of its own ease of use, because the Volt per octave input has an edge detector, which basically detects a change in pitch. It will then send its own millisecond pulse to trigger itself. So that's why I think people think it has a sound. I mean, of course it does have a sound, but a very specific one when you don't use any other input.
Yeah. And it's easy to use that way. She's built that into the module that you don't need to put several other things into it to use it. But when you do, it's much more rewarding. I have a little Folktech Nano Garden that I feed through the rings in my case, my gigging case, and things like bowing the strings on the Nano Garden, going through a resonator in here with the structure turned to a particularly noisy setting. It's just, blowhorn of God type sounds, not a little plucky stuff.
Nice. I guess there are some oscillators or sound sources lending themselves more to immediate use and thereby also like more kind of preset-ish sounds. So I guess the whole thing is getting beyond that and exploring it deeply.
Yeah.
Very much so. I mean, if you wanted presets, why do you have a modular?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So now that we've slagged off little plucky sounds, the next module is a 2 HP pluck.
They go really well together, actually. I had Dream Combo in my live case for a while that I did a performance with. I'll have to dig the audio out. The Proton from Audio Damage, which was their take on like a Carplus Strong string synth. The 2 HP pluck and rings. And it was for voices, really free, but rings doing its kind of split stereo thing that it does. Really nice to layer together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This sounds good. It has a range of sounds, but it sounds good. So if I need an additional plucky sequence or arpeggiated line, if I want to layer a pluck with something else, say I have a big fat analog sound, but I want to add an attack transient, I'll layer this in with it. 2 HP modules are a little tricky to use because they're so narrow. Only one set of the pins are plugged into the power cord.
Yeah.
It makes it very easy for the power cord just to come off. I've had them fall off in my live case. Not a good thing. That's why I use knurlies in my live case, so I can plunge into there without tools that I need to.
I'm going to drop the 2 HP pluck video I did in the chat. Reason being, and bookmark it and come back to it. Of course, stick with what we're doing here. But the pluck demo video, it's a great trick where you turn the decay up full and it will decay endlessly. And because like rings, it will overlap its voice. Not polyphonic in that you can address 4 pitches at the same time, but they will continue to ring over each other. So when the decay is full, it will continually drone a 4-note chord. So you can continue to feed it pitch information, and of course every new note you lose with the fourth one back from that. But if you're careful with your tuning, you can work your way through some really beautiful, moving, kind of layered sounds that have a lot of overlap and shared chord voices between. It's a really nice way to work.
Nice. Are you sharing that trick in the video?
Yes,
Ben?
that trick is. I think I timing indexed it as well. No, I didn't. Naughty boy. I should have timing indexed it. I don't think it's a super long video though. It won't be tricky to find. I'm not going to actually watch it live, but yeah, just crank the decay full is effectively the trick.
Does this go for the bell too?
I'm not sure on the bell. Do you know, Chris? You tried that?
No, I don't. I don't have the bell one. That's a very cool application, though, Ben. And it's kind of funny because I've been going the opposite direction with it. Is this and some other modules, like some of the WMD percussive modules that can infinitely sustain, is instead of using their internal envelope, I'd put them in the infinite mode and then run them through my own low-pass gates just to give it a different envelope sound than maybe what is built in with their own envelope generator.
It's almost like working with... doing that with the pluck, but having, as you say, VCAs or low pass gates, and then carving out all the information. It's almost like having a looping sample, where it's just maybe on a really primitive sample player, like a radio music, where you can't really do that much with it on board. So you're kind of carving it up downstream. 4 minutes 25 in that video demo is where that happens. If people want to kind of check that sound out.
Okay.
It's really lovely sound.
Cool.
And really good point you make that I imagine we'll explore in the next episode about having additional level control downstream from things that are already being shaped internally.
Yeah. So this is the other module row of my sound sources. So this is the row I'm going to put my samplers in.
Mm-hmm.
And one sampler I particularly like is the Bitbox.
Yeah.
The reason I originally was attracted to this is I used to be an Ableton Live user. And this was the closest thing I could find to having Ableton Live in a module. It's like Live 1.0 to a degree, but I really enjoyed it. And this was a mainstay of my gigging case for a long time. I ran out of space for it in the gigging case, and I moved to a black box outside the gigging case. So I'm putting this then into my studio case so I can swap my samples and my loops in between the two systems.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. That's kind of a key part of getting audio around. Do you use samplers much, Kim, or loops or anything, pre-prepared material?
I actually, yeah, because I come from the same point as Chris from Ableton Live. I've used it since the first version, because that's very much the way I do music, asynchronous loops, different measurements and beats and stuff. So, and I'm actually surprised that it took so long before someone made a module like this, which was so much like the Ableton kind of workflow. So I have this one too. Actually, I bought it from Frank in the chat.
Oh, okay, nice. Hi, Frank.
Now, idiosyncrasy of this case, by the way, is that it's 197 HP wide. It's an odd number of HP.
Is it that when you buy it,
So,
or is that something you've done with the size?
that's the way it was when I bought it. That's what 1 meter is.
Oh, it's just advertised
And,
as, hey, here's a 1 meter case.
So there's some places where I need to leave little gaps occasionally, unless I happen to have like Pico modules or Harvestman modules, etc. And I decided to leave my 1 HP space next to the 2 HP module.
Yeah.
Good
Just
choice.
to give my fingers more room here, because otherwise, if that gap wasn't there, I wouldn't be able to get to that control.
But one thing is getting to the controls. One thing is like fitting beside another module, further down. That's
Yes.
been a problem for me sometimes with some of my module placements.
Yeah. Yeah, I've struggled with smaller modules before. Certainly in the live case, and when it's in a case that has sides that are taller than the rails, where you have a 12U case where one of them needs to kind of almost fold into the other and let the cables dangle down. It's definitely trickier. I tend to go set and forget with them, or just it's something that I modulate and I don't need to touch. Or there's one knob. If it's something more important, I'll go for something else in a live situation usually.
Yeah, that's why I've moved to a lot of 3HP, excuse me, 3HP size Pico modules from America. They're
Yeah.
just that more ergonomic. They have all the pins for the power connector. But I have some 2HPs in my gigging case too.
Yeah.
Disting. People who know me are probably shocked that I've not put a disting in yet.
I am shocked.
Originally, an early version of this case had one disting in each row, so that I could have a utility do anything module anywhere in the case. Since then, 2 distings have gone into my case I use for videos. 3 distings have gone into my gigging case. And I fried one disting when someone sold me a module with a power cable that had one connector backwards. So this is my last disting.
The last disting.
You need a top up.
I need a top up, but also I'm looking at replacing one of the distings in my travel case with a certain unannounced module that will free it up to come into this case. So.
I do know what that unannounced thing is, and I'm staring.
Yeah,
staring at one of them.
it frees up a couple modules in my case. So I'm happy. Something that gives me space back in my case.
Yeah, always aiming to please. We, in fact, someone very potent to that conversation when we brought this up on Wednesday did kind of drop themselves in the chat as if by magic. Their ears had pricked and they joined. I'm going to say no more.
Did he know? Or was it just pure coincidence?
Pure coincidence. Maybe was watching in the background, not paying attention, but then heard some element of tease.
Or something about, gee, I wish I had a better one of these.
Yeah. We were vague, but enough that if he was sat there watching an is, maybe he'll pop in again. But yeah. Sorry to tease. I'm not actually going to do the teaser thing with.
No,
this
and I'm going to
device,
play.
but...
I'm going to keep being the trains will run on time person. I'm going to keep bowling ahead here on module installs.
Yeah, no, keep going.
You'll find on my modular grid of this case that I am leaving a 4 HP space here to put in another disting.
Okay.
Part of it is to be central, to be a utility module. Part of it is I have been using these as samplers quite a bit, and I really like them as sample players. They have several different sample modes. I have one that's 2 percussion channels inside this one module. I have another one that's very speed with reverse. It's really fun for ambient beds. I really enjoy these as sample players.
Speaking of which, I can ambient bed the stream. I don't know if you two can hear this. Even without my vocal effects, we can. I do have granular samples and effects in the background, which are for the intro. Rather nice.
Yeah.
Quantum space, what is Oz building? I wasn't talking about Oz from Expert Sleepers then, about a new 4HP thing. But Oz, I would imagine, is up to things.
Oz does not stop building things.
No.
So we'll see what's next.
I mean, what seemed to be interesting, thinking of new modules, is what happens around Superbooth. We've, of course, got Heimbach and Constantine's, who was here earlier, special reserve version of their single malt synthesis stream, which I'll be joining, and the Q Sonic event as well from Sonic State, which again I'll be joining a couple of days after Heimbach's. Be interesting to see how much actually releases with what's going on, and how many people actually maybe feel some relief of, I can release it the first week of May and not have to worry about getting to Berlin on time.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is a lot of people probably breathe a sigh of relief of, I don't have to really jam to get this done now.
Knobs and Strings says, it was Alex from WMD if I was not mistaken. I completely missed Alex, if he popped in. Good guy. If he popped in last time. But it wasn't.
We were talking about Alex last time.
But it wasn't a WMD module we were teasing. Also, funnily, he's really paid attention. Go on, Knobs and Strings. I said last time that I've dropped Easter eggs in video descriptions before, knowing that no one really reads them. So he's encouraging people to go and look at the video description. There are no Easter eggs, I think, in this one. I'll have some fun with that in the future, though.
Yeah. There should be. It's Easter.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Lack of Easter eggs. Well, we'll see what happens. Oh, before we go to the top row, let's see if we've made any smoke. Let's see if I put any modules in backwards. Oh, looks good. Everyone's screens came up.
There we go.
All right.
Great.
Good. All right. I'm doing well. And now the power switch is off, and there's no current inside the case, so I'm safe, everyone. Thank you for your concern. We talked about it at the start of the show.
Yeah.
Let's talk about analog oscillators, because I do love a good analog oscillator. So that's what this top row is reserved for, several interesting analog oscillators. And the first one, Ben, I'm actually going to let you talk about, because you're the one who convinced me that I should get this. And that is the DivKid's one. Let's see if I hold it up here.
Oh, what a lovely thing! Let me grab it. I've got the.
It's amazing.
I had to go full. Let's both pretend to hold one, Kim. Quick.
Oh, you got the Raven, huh?
Yeah. No, this is the same thing, but they made a small series of cases with the expanders in, including with MIDI to CV, power, envelope, and then the normal mixer and additional CV expanders. But really, really great analog engineering. Just an attention to detail in. I mean, I can't say I've actually gone through and looked through the circuit board, but in sonic quality and sound.
It's very clean circuit board, by the way.
Mike and the team's work, much like, say, Alan at AJH Synth, just really, really stunning work. And you play it, and even friends that are like, yeah, I've got analog stuff, like that's not really where I'm at with modular, like I like my vintage synths, so I want modular to do something different. They play it, even though it's a single oscillator and filter at the core, and their ears prick up. It really is a great sounding bit of kit. It's nice to
Kim,
see
excuse me, Ben, describe its topology, because it's not just an oscillator.
No, so you have at the top, let me pull an image up rather than hold it. You do have an oscillator at the core, and then a filter that will also oscillate, which is nice to then frequency modulate itself. DivKid. Let me just pull the page.
I'll admit I completely misunderstood this module, because when I heard it's an oscillator, but with a filter, I thought, oh, he's self-oscillating the filter to create a sine core oscillator and going off of that. No, that's not what it is. But you can use that, as you say, for some cool FM stuff.
Yeah, so it is really, in essence, a great sounding analog oscillator and then a great sounding filter. The thing you have in this system, and one trick that I really, really like on the mixer section, there is a noise input that is normal to one of the mix inputs. And when I'm mixing, this is one of my kind of patch tips in Patch and Tweak, actually, that when you're mixing things into, say, the front of a filter, I really like having like a sub to add weight and emphasis, the main wave, and then some noise for fuzziness. And just having noise as an output, but also having it normal to the mixer, it makes it for a great little 4-channel mixer noise source. The filter does track, but it's lovely without, truth be told. It's lovely just as a filter as opposed to being an oscillating source. It's one of those where everything you modulate starts to shine. Audio rate PWM is lovely. There's some switching for some of the internal modulation between them. And then the expanders add further modulation, extra FM, handy little headphone out for this particular mini system that they built. So for you, how do you tend to use it, Chris? Are you tending to go, this is an oscillator? Or is it an oscillator and a filter? Is it the oscillating filter feeding and modulating the other? How do you kind of view it? How does it sit your particular workflow?
Let me get my back on camera focus here where you can see it. I admit that so far I'm underusing it, because it was another one of those things that I got just before I took the case apart to start working on it, and it has been a year-long project. So far, I've been treating it as an oscillator and playing with the filter, doing FMing and things like that. So I've been treating it as more of a complex oscillator, or as something that can do timbral variations out of the oscillator, and not yet treating it as a voice. There's been a couple of oscillators recently, such as particularly the 4MS Spherical Waveform Navigator. It's gotten me thinking of, wow, these oscillators are so powerful, maybe I should just make a small voice case based around them. And this would be a candidate for something like that. But right now I'm treating it as a analog oscillator with timbral possibilities that are far beyond a typical analog oscillator.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting point from David Powland that analog oscillators would potentially be more susceptible to heat, and then the heat's going to rise up that case. Is that the worst place to put the analog oscillators?
There is a row of ventilation holes that I drilled into the case right behind this row of modules. So this is actually where heat's going to get released from the case rather than build up. Also, if I just do the convective cooling thing where I'm just letting heat rise through the case, it's going to exit here. Second is I do have fans that are exhaling from the case. If I use the fans, they're going to pull cool air in from here outside across these modules first before they go down through. So I'm hoping that somewhere or another I'm going to have a good system. But I'll tell you what's most important is just stabilizing the temperature. Your system can run hot as long as it's stable.
Yeah.
I had a problem with this case initially that if I closed every hole, it just kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. So things would drift over time. I added a couple of the rare SSF ventilation panels, two in the bottom, two at the top of this case. It stabilized the temperature. I stopped having drift problems in this case.
It's interesting. Hello to This Is Not Rocket Science in the chat. They said that actually not going to Berlin does ease the pressure with the Phoenix prototype that they're working on. But of course, the big thing is it's missing everyone and the interaction, which is going to be a real shame. There's no getting around that. But it's nice everyone's mobilizing to stream and trying to bring a bit of that into our worlds at the minute. This Is Not Rocket Science streamed last night, which is worth going and checking out. I will go grab the link and pop it in the chat in a minute. With the new circular thing, which was 2 Bafako kick-alls that could, I can see you teasing, Chris, that, that could modulate each other. And then it came up again, I was streaming just after that with Finley from Future Sound Systems, led to us talking about frequency modulating drum voices against each other, so that if, say, a kick drum hits when a snare does, the snare is going to just give it a little bit of fuzz and FM. But if your pattern's mostly not playing together, you're only going to hear it occasionally.
Yeah.
And those ideas have been pulled into the new circular thing. I'll go grab the link and pop that in the chat for people watching. But yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting concept you two were talking about, because I remember the exact opposite extreme. There was a period in the 80s where drummers were trying to mute everything possible to get every rattle out of their drums.
Yeah.
Steve Gadd is well known for doing that. And Frank Zappa had a synclavier and actually recorded every drum of a drum kit in complete isolation so he could have that perfect drum kit with no rattle. But as you say, it's actually the interaction, the soundboard in the piano or the body of guitar that actually makes a lot of these instruments richer sounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I don't really like drum sample packs where there's no bleed. I can just use samples and throw them on things if I want complete separation. That's kind of my approach to working with percussion that way. But yeah, I'll drop because I've just found it, the live stream. God, I'm gonna have to just pull it up on screen. Look at that beauty that is the Phoenix prototype.
Oh yeah.
Good Lord.
So is it pronounced Phoenix? I kept calling it Phoenix, but it's Phoenix?
I think Finley was calling it Phoenix last night. Now, I'm not going to be one to pronounce anything right, let's be honest.
I was like you, Ben. I thought it was Zayoc devices, not Chaos devices.
Yeah, I've had that. If Stein or Priscilla are still in the chat from This Is Not Rocket Science,
well, they can tell us the right way to pronounce it.
Yeah, Phoenix or Phoenix. You can see the reply now is just going to say it's Phoenix, not Phoenix. When you read it back. Phoenix like the bird with a PH, or
it should have 2 E's if it was Phoenix. Anyway.
Phoenix with 5-6 E's in it. So I'm taking that as the E instead of
okay, I am wrong.
There we go.
I'm happy to admit it when I'm wrong.
I'm happy to be right. It's rare I get anything accent based or in terms of actually getting some diction right. So yeah, bonus points for me. But I saw.
Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, I saw you teasing the AFG.
Yes. The daddy. Who's your daddy when it comes to analog oscillators?
So the thing,
This sounds like true love.
yeah, it was my true. It was the thing that made me realize how, and I don't mean this in a way to say that I have issues with this, as some people kind of derogatory call Eurorack too small and unusable, that like bigger formats. I was surprised how small it was. I'd seen pictures online, and I thought this thing was going to be like mammoth, like the size of my head, which is no small thing. I thought it was just going to be this huge, like, yeah, like almost not quite. But weird. I knew what 3U was. I'd used a lot of 19-inch rack gear, so I was aware of its dimensions, but was somehow shocked when I opened it, being the first module I ever bought. Phoenix with the F is actually the Dutch spelling of Phoenix, PH, as in.
Well, there you go.
So there we go.
I believe that.
Cool tale. Did you catch the story about Jasper, the Jasper Wasp clone synth last night, Chris?
I did not. I missed that one.
I'll be brief, but Matthew Shaw told me that in Sheffield, and then lots of other people in the chat said that around Kent, South London, they say this as well. The Wasp synth is cloned, and you can have a Jasper synth. That's just the name of the clone. People call Wasps Jaspers.
Ah.
So you could be, you get back, sister rings. Oh yeah, we had a great family picnic, but it's full of Jaspers all over the food. It's just such an odd thing while we're talking about that. But to get back on point, it's a hell of a PCB sandwich, the AFG.
Yeah, I have the old school discrete component or through-hole component one that Mike Brown did.
Yeah.
They've redone it now with surface mount.
Yeah.
But this was unobtainium for a while. I got one of the refurbished ones from Livewire. And I just love this thing. It sounds freaking huge. It has all these modulation capabilities to really just move otherwise simple waveforms around. And the other thing that really impressed me is it tracks amazingly well. Mm-hmm. Analog has this bad rap. This thing out of the box tracks several octaves.
Yeah.
I was just stunned. And just for when I need to knock down a wall today, this is what I patch.
The jackhammer.
Yeah.
Which is going to be the name of an acid rain technology drum module, actually, I think, the jackhammer, if I remember right. What's the saying on the board? There's 3 different revisions of the AFG, all with various sayings and different coloured PCBs. Can you see one to hand?
I'm looking for a saying. Mine still has the connector for the audio composition board that never came along.
Yeah.
He teased me that. Livewire Electronics, I don't see it. Where should I see a saying? AFG harmonic animation.
It might be on an internal board that you'd have to take apart.
Yeah, it might be inside the
see.
stack somewhere.
I think they all had a saying on a different.
Well, this is okay. Well, just so you know, this is version 1.0 Rev A.
Right. Okay.
2008.
Okay.
And let's see if I can figure out how to plug in 2 power cables without dropping this.
Why are the cables? Is that just tape over the cable? Why are they blue?
I thought I could buy any old ribbon cables off of Amazon and they would work. And they actually have the red stripe on the wrong side of the connector.
So the blue is a
for
visual
Eurorack.
Hey, watch what you're doing kind of thing.
So the blue is just to cover up the red stripe to say no. It's the skinny part is the red stripe in my mind now on these.
Right. Right, I've got you.
Yeah. You cannot just buy any cable. I know Paul Schreiber has a particularly sexist derogatory term for these cables. But yeah, you just got to be careful. This is one of the things that causes you to fry modules.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm keeping my bets. Oh.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, this is quite a wide module, though it might not be as wide as you feared, Ben, but how would you go about, having those many possibilities of, harmonic content variation in a smaller module? Do you have any particular examples to put in a live case?
I'll let you
Well, one example is one of the things it can do is it can modulate both the leading and trailing edge of a square wave. So it has like double pulse width modulation. And if you got something like, I think Geranalog sells a double comparator. that looks for a low level and a high level. If you put a sawtooth wave through his double comparator, you could then simulate that little part of motion this thing does, for example.
Yeah, yeah, which is a great shout out for utilities that compare to, and I don't mean this is my view, but I know a lot of people feel that way. Is maybe the less sexy of some of the Ger Analog lineup, but it really offers a hell of a lot, from wonky beats to adding pulse width modulation to things, to creating squares, all the different voltage control comparator behavior, almost like surge patch programmability kind of vibe to it. It's really powerful little thing, as is Select 2 as well. That's a great utility.
Yeah, so love this for having big sound. Not saying that there's not other analog oscillators that don't have a big sound, but this is another one of those little weird things. I'm more of a square wave guy than a sawtooth guy.
Oh, Chris, that's it. We're over.
I know. I like a hollow sound. I mean, sawtooth takes up all the space.
Yeah.
You know, you have to get into EQ and frequency carving to make room for something else.
Yeah. The animated section, I will give you, the animated pulses are way better than the strangely duller alien saws, I find.
Yes. The alien saws are disappointing. You think, ooh, this is going to be cool. No, it's just a different saw with fewer harmonics.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing, but if you think alien cool, oh well.
Yeah. Have you delved into all the jumpers on the back to change the wave shapes?
I have not.
I haven't either.
See, Livewire has teased me that they're going to do the composer expander that never got made. And I keep thinking that'll be the answer.
I maybe have an option to get a second AFG, which is a hideous amount of space. And then when you think of this expander between, but it's kind of like going back to my dream of what I thought was going to be the Eurorack system early on. I'm tempted for almost nostalgia reasons. Well, it's not nostalgia because I never experienced it. It didn't exist, but it's very tempting. Very tempting.
But you also mentioned the size of these modules. I mean, I also come from, old school, 5U, 6U, 7U, the old stuff. When I first started getting Eurorack modules, for years, every time I got one, I said, how cute. It should go into a dollhouse. Because I just wasn't used to being that small.
So, Chris, there's a question about why does it have 2 power connectors?
Because it draws that much power. But he also
The obvious answer.
It draws a lot of amperage. I don't really know. Mike's no longer with us, but they do go to different boards on it. I think he probably figured it was better to take a power connector straight into there rather than to run additional things through jumpers in between boards to get the power off to one of the piggybacked boards on there.
Yeah, Stephen in the chat says, is this better than a Chaos Devices Odessa? Very, very different. I mean, the term better... that's
really
a very
different.
Subjective thing when we say best, better, worst. It's like, well, depends on what application. If you want a drum module that does an 808 bass drum, is the tip-top 808 the best one? But then would that be the one you would suggest if someone said, what's the best bass drum module? It's not the most varied.
Well, it's like Jaguar F-Type or 57 Chevy. I mean,
yeah. So, but they're very different. The Odessa is a digital additive synthesizer that works with partials, which are the harmonics in a signal, and then ways of kind of combing through and stacking those harmonics to build thicker structures. The AFG, being analog, has richer waves to start with. You do have sines and triangles as well, but you've got squares and subs and some additional ways of animating them beyond just pulse width modulation. So fairly different and very different in practice when you plug them both in.
It's cool. Let's keep moving. Here's my go-to analog oscillator. It's quite often the first thing I patch. WMD Spectrum. It's just rock solid.
Yeah.
It has octave switches. It has alternate waveforms, so it doesn't sound like just the standard saw or square. I really like some of these variations on the waves. It has FM. It has pulse width. It has everything you want. Tracks pretty well. It does have calibration hole on the very front panel, which is what I like. Sometimes just pulling a module out changes the temperature, and you calibrate it, and you put it back in, and it's hotter in the case, and it goes out of calibration. Drives me nuts. He's got the calibration through the front. Thank you very much. Whenever I'm just thinking, okay, I need an analog oscillator, quite often this is the first thing I patch. It's just, I love this thing.
Okay. The wizardry of Andrew Morelli from SSF coupled with William from WMD for this lineup.
Yes.
The whole collaboration line is an interesting one. The folder I remember liking, the envelope that was just an ADSR with a VCA that could be used separately or linked. Just some nice things in there. The slew as well, I think, was one of the first to try and add in more heavy-handed curve compensation. So as you were going through linear and exponential curves on the slew, it would try and compensate for the time change, which is inherent when you do that in an analog circuit. Really nicely done, and some just very good. As you say, some of them could be, you know, almost bread and butter of analog oscillator, folder, filter, VCAs, but each one has a bit of a twist, which is really nice.
Yeah. They're very thorough.
Yeah.
And they're well thought out, and they perform well too.
Yeah.
And you can choose the sub oscillator waveform, right? You have a few choices. So what's your favorite choice, Chris? Is it
I'm a square wave guy. Sorry.
Oh, Chris, square waves and square wave subs. Oh no.
Although, yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have room for that particular module in this case. I will do a shout out to the AJH ring mod SM because it has a very cool sub octave that's more filtered on the low end. More filtered on the high end, so it doesn't compete with other things, but more raw on the low end. And I really like that particular implementation. The sub octaves in the Erica Fusion VCO is pretty cool too. So actually, sometimes I do find square wave to be a bit overbearing for sub, and I might filter it a little bit. So I like other modules that give you alternates to the square wave for the sub octave.
Yeah, a nice thing I found, we spoke earlier about taking sines or triangles octave lower and recording them clean. So when you're multi-tracking modular, maybe into a production environment, you have a sub that was all tracked from the sources rather than trying to rebuild in or kind of jack up low end in a bass sound. If you've only got a sub, or you have to use a clock or audio divider to get a divide down 2 to get the squared off sub, having a filter that will track volt per octave is the way around that. If you've only got a square wave sub, put it into its own filter, adjust the cutoff until it's of a kind of thickness and warmth that you like, either very clean and sine-like or a little bit more harmonics, but for me, usually never anywhere near that close of a square. And then have that filter volt per octave track the pitch, and that wave shape will stay somewhat consistent across the range.
Yeah, a surprising amount of the time I'm taking just the sine wave out of even the AFG or the spectrum and using that to double up something else just to add a lower harmonic underneath some of the digital stuff.
Yep. We get...
Now for a weird analog oscillator. The Doepfer.
Is it the through zero?
Trapezoid through zero quadrature VCO.
There we go. That's relatively new, right?
It's relatively new, just a few years old. It's a pretty new oscillator core based on an unusual quadrature wave shape. It came from a paper where it could be done in software, and Dieter figured out how to do it in hardware. So it's an unusual trapezoid waveform that is between a triangle, square, saw. It's a little more muted. It has a nice tone to it. But it's also a very flexible through zero, and you can adjust where the crossover points. I mean, there's some really cool things now, like the SSF zero oscillator and stuff like that. Just awesome. I got this a few years ago when it came out because I wanted a through zero linear analog FM oscillator, and this was the coolest of the ones at the time, I thought.
Almost reminds...
I couldn't afford the full zero oscillator. What's Andrew's SSF one called?
The ZPO, the 0 point, or do you mean the old
0 point oscillator?
Or do you mean the old
Cynthia's was the zero oscillator?
Yeah, zero oscillator from Cynthia. Yeah.
That's another piece of unobtainium.
Yeah. There was one in Modular 8 last year when I was there, which, saying that could be stupid, it could have been long gone the day I left. This was back in October, but it's the first time I'd seen one in the flesh in Modular 8 in Portland, Oregon. The trapezoid reminds me of it's interesting. It's a more muted version of a square ramp triangle hybrid, looping a VCS3, the MS Symphy trapezoid generator. Some really lovely tones. I was very fortunate at university to have access to 2 of those. They've 2 VCS3s.
That's a nice idea.
Huddersfield University and a System 100M. in a very nice surround studio. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned it. I don't know how you'd get that shape without a specific trapezoid generator. I'd have to kind of sit and work through it a little bit.
There's some tricks you can do with flip-flops and
Some
and
envelopes that
switches.
could maybe go up to audio that would be easier than trying to switch out oscillators, potentially.
Actually, one of those wave slicer type oscillators might be a good approach to that.
Yeah. Thoughts on, someone did ask earlier, and he's not here, so you can slag him off all you like. Just joking. The recombination engine, someone said, because I wonder,
Yes.
they were looking at your modular grid, I think, and there's a comment a good hour or so back saying that may be an interesting addition. Very recent, beyond this plan of this case, so that's probably why it's not there. But
Yeah, I mean, it's just now shipping, right?
yeah, yesterday. Started shipping out. So yeah, it couldn't be part of the plan.
However, not tomorrow, the next episode, we're going to get into some things like crossfaders, and that's how I patch my own versions of that recombinant waveform idea. And we'll talk about that a lot more Wednesday, I promise, because that's a particular thing of interest. I also have a mock wave razor oscillator waiting for me to learn it and write it up for Synth and Software Magazine, and it might replace something in this case, depending how it goes.
Interesting. So
But something that will never get replaced in this case, this is a desert island one, is I will always have the verbose harmonic oscillator in this case.
I need to send you an oct, and I need to borrow someone's harmonic and someone's
Yeah,
harmonic.
that'd be a lot of
someone's
fun.
harmonic oscillator just to have drifting harmonic control.
It's like made
Something
for
I've
that.
done is I'll get one of those chaos generators like the Chakwa or Chaotica, and take the different outputs for like harmonic scan and width and things like that. Not as detailed as putting an oct into each of these, but does give you the scanning and changing a shape while it goes around.
Yeah, I love that with the Fumana filter bank, which is a different thing. It's not an oscillator, but yeah, not just individual level control. It's really powerful.
Well, that's an important point. That's, I think, the people who sell these are the ones who dial in something and goes, it sounds like an organ. And what's the point? It's like drawbars on an organ. And if that's all you do, yeah, it becomes a very static sounding oscillator very quickly. As you say, the secret is in modulating, so those harmonics are moving around. And then it just becomes a fascinating oscillator that you can really dial in your tone.
Phileas Fogg in the chat says it sounds like geese, which would be plural for a goose. It's what I think he means. It makes me wonder and laugh every time I touch it. I've never had a harmonic gaggle of geese. I'm curious as to what you mean. If you can send me a geese harmonic oscillator patch, that'd be great.
Well, one interesting point about this is that it's not sine waves. It's not a pure additive thing. Each wave is actually this kind of rough rounded triangle. So it's already a kind of a richer, cloudier sound than a typical additive synth.
Yeah.
And that's why I have this in addition to the EXOS from Wisolator, EXOS Wisolator that we started with. There are two very different approaches to so-called additive synthesis.
Yeah.
I might just add that there's actually a very cool tip in Patch and Tweak about this, Chris, that you made about patching the velocity
Yes.
to some of the harmonics, so you'll get kind
I'll
of
do that. I'll
extra
patch
brightness.
velocity to a couple of the high harmonics, just so a hard note will have that little bit of extra brightness, or almost the equivalent of overdrive into a mixing console. Quite often, if you have a microphoned piano going into a mixer, really hard notes will clip the mic preamps. It's that particular spitting sound that's a particular character that I remember from ska music and stuff like that. And that's what I was simulating by sending velocity into these high harmonics, just to get that little bit of high-end fuzz on top on hard notes.
Really nice.
I'll just say it rather than type the reply. Heavy Noise says there's been no Oct at Schneider's Laden for weeks. Yeah, it's been out for a while. It did incredibly well. Thank you to everyone that supported the release of the Oct LFO module. Really, really incredible. We did quite heavily overestimate the size. Well, we thought we were heavily overestimating the size of the run. we weren't kind of shy in what we produced up front, but the amazing support just made that thing fly. More are coming. Should be a few weeks to maybe a month out, hopefully. The virus really threw production in China for us, so I'll be sure to shout about it everywhere when they're available again. Yeah. And if I move
one more
us out
quick
of the way,
smoke test before we go on here. All right. I'm seeing, of course, the AFG does not have any LEDs, but everything else is lighting up. That's cool. Good. Haven't smoked one yet. I'm overdue, I think.
I'm losing this bet.
I'm getting cocky. I'm getting cocky now. This is when it's going to all blow up.
Yeah. That's when it's going to happen.
Yeah, by now, Kim, if you're saying 2, we need 1 generally for the odds by the end of tonight.
Well, I was going to ask, we're a little past the 2-hour mark that we supposedly promised. Well, we're way past the 2-hour mark. Do you want to keep going with the Waveshapers, or?
I'm happy to go for a short while, but it's a good point rather than waiting to the end and then having to deal with the delay in the chat. While you're doing that, and of course we'll still discuss it, but do get screwing them in if you want to get them in the case. We'll not a last call, but certainly a call for questions in the chat. I know Kim and I are watching, and we'll feed questions through to Chris. Or it can be a completely separate question if you want. These very open kind of. There's intention to what we're doing here, but it's also a bit of a hangout with everyone. So if any questions about anything else is totally welcome, as long as it's somewhat related.
I don't have that many Waveshapers, so maybe I can burn through these relatively quickly.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at my modular grid chart, see how we want to go. Yeah, we'll see how far we go. I'll just burn through stuff. One thing I just love having is a super saw.
Yep, absolutely.
I like the Happy Nerding super saw tour. I do kind of wish I had the Cynthia one. It has another band. It brings out all of the LFOs to the front panel, so you can go modulate other stuff with that bank of detuned LFOs. There's like a very early, not quite as interesting, but the same idea Oct in that regard.
Yeah.
But the Super Saw Tour sounds really great. And don't use it just on sawtooth waves, by the way. It's really cool on triangles and sine waves. That, I think, is even better than the big sawtooth clouds.
Yeah, someone that did a really nice job of using that was Tyler Thompson, produces music as T2 from WMD, and he was running the output of his filters into it. So he was using it like an end-of-chain effect. Rather than going oscillator into super saw, cloud of nice, rich, buzzy unison, then into filters and VCAs and things, it was after the filter. So it was reacting effectively to saws and squares being shaped closer to sines with the envelopes on his filters. Patch example, rather lovingly and nicely shown from Patch and Tweak there. Kim, you must be frantically carving through pages for images to send.
I could do so, but I can point people again to the downloadable PDF. There are some patches, and this is just one of Chris's very nice tips. I just need to buy that module at some point, but
so do I.
I mean, what I really like about Chris's approach is about this approach about accentuating notes, or creating that instant little temporal difference in the attack or the decay or whatever. And I think that's where modular gets much more exciting than just plugging notes ahead, or how you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, real acoustic instruments, there are variations between notes, and that's I go for that in modulars. I want different notes to sound different.
Eldo Abram in the chat says, do studio quality preamps matter much on the production quality when it comes to modular synths? To throw a few other people's thoughts out before we get into that, I know Chris Randall of Audio Damage, who certainly has his own taken approach on replying to such questions, shall we say, has always said that it's absolutely pointless attenuating a signal so much to give, say, like a really nice 500 series rack preamp what that wants to see at its input to do its job, to just bring the level back up. Now, of course, how it brings the level up is very different from just very clean attenuation and level boost. I know people like Tachi and Richard Devine are running things through nice gear and for great results. What's your take on that, Chris? Are you just trying to get every sound absolutely nailed in the rack and it into the system as clean as possible, because that's largely been my approach, unless it's destructive processing rather than like nice warm, Neve preamp on the way in or something.
And this is another case where what I do in the studio differs from what I do live. In the studio, it's in the patch.
Yeah.
I want to patch the sound that I want, and then I want a very clean signal chain. I don't want it to fuzz something up that I was trying to get clean. I don't want to lose or a bass I wanted to be there. I don't want to emphasize it when it wasn't supposed to be there. On the other hand, when I play live, since I play percussion and sometimes I play with other people who play a lot of sustained notes like guitarists or keyboardists, I'm fighting to get an average level as hot as they are. So I need to sacrifice my dynamic range, and my favorite trick is to go into a nice analog mixer like an old Mackie and drive it really hard to get that old style. I'm trying to remember the guy who produced the Cars and Queen and a bunch of other bands. Real slam the board analog saturation sound to be my compressor. But that's a live situation where it's hot. You're trying to get people excited. You're trying to be loud, match everyone. Studio, I'm trying to get the patch and the sound out of the modular and then get it out as clean as I can.
But are you doing that because you're coming out of the live case at a lower level, out of like a line level output, so then you're kind of on everyone else's level and you're having a bump up because they are? Because if you were going all straight into the same board, Euro would be way hotter.
Well, yeah, I have output modules to bring it down to +4 and send it off to the board. But the thing is, if I want to maintain the attack transient without clipping, I need to reduce the average level down pretty far to give myself my own headroom. So I need to compress those transients in some ways when I get into noise battles with other musicians. And my preferred way of doing it is saturation of the mixer.
Yeah. Okay, another question as we go through. Again, I'm trying to find an image. Thoughts on, I think they said the microsound tape machine as a kind of pre-done ready case. Have you managed to have a look at that?
I'm not familiar with that. What do you guys know about it?
Not a huge amount. Shared systems are a really lovely thing. Thinking of pre-made systems, and it's a really nice space to live in and explore. I'm just pulling it up now on the Make Noise site. I'm not entirely sure what is in the case, to be truthful. There is a Woggle Bug, which is a nice random source, clock source, ring mod, maths, the kind of Swiss Army knife, Morphogene for samples, QPass mimeophone, and the new output. There's a hell of a lot to explore. Definitely.
Yeah, I like the earlier version of this one. It was like, I forget what he called it, the tape music one or whatever. It was before this one. I haven't looked at the newer version, but I really thought the earlier one was very intriguing.
Yeah. What about you, Kim? Does that seem like something you'd want to explore? Would it fit your style and workflow?
Probably. Right now I'm just trying to incorporate samples in a more like seamless workflow. And I actually sold my Morphogene, for example, to get the Nebulae version 2.
Okay.
So for me, granular is fine, but I make a lot of my samples are drones and more like layered stuff. So I need to pull some of that stuff apart to make more use of the microsound capability. But the stereo filtering, I mean, that's awesome. I would love to explore that.
Yeah.
I think it's a very cool instrument. The only question is that the instrument that speaks to you, or you want to play, or the type of music you want to make right now?
It's usually, I got this shuttle system way back from Endorphins, and with systems like this, you have to work within the limitations of the system, and I feel sometimes that can be a good thing, but the whole point with modular also is that you actually kind of don't have those kinds of limitations. So it's kind of, but I can have fun with the O coast and the zero coast, no coast, whatever, for hours. So I think it's a balance, right? Sometimes you want one thing, sometimes you want the other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to get through a few different questions quickly, Jay VF Mastering says, what about covering some pedals in the future? I use the Empress Zoya, and now comes along the Euro Bioro version, the modular version, of the same thing but with more I/O. I've got some work coming with Empress, probably with the Euro Bioro around its release. Not sure quite what's happening. I need to check in with Mitch. But also looking at CV controlling guitar pedals as well, and a series on pedals and synths. I found the Patreon post from about 3 years ago of like, hey, I'm going to start doing this year, and it just didn't happen.
We should
That's
do
something-
some stuff. Yeah, we should do some stuff from Patch and Tweak actually.
Well, I mean, Kim, between Pedal Crush and Patch and Tweak, that's your territory.
Yeah, but I'm actually interested in hearing. I mean, Ben, you use pedals, but Chris, you don't use any pedals yet, right?
We'll talk about that in the 4th episode.
Okay, let's
You're
save
gonna
it.
save some routing, okay. But yeah, pedals were the thing as a younger teenager that really hooked me on sound, and realized trying to figure out what my guitar was doing and the amp, and drummer first and foremost was my first instrument for anyone curious, but super supportive parents that I could smash the hell out of the drum kit and practice at home with the band in the bedroom, but once we had to stop, early in the evening, for the sake of the neighbours, it was a case of, well, everyone else is just playing turned down, or they're playing an acoustic guitar, or they just haven't plugged their electric in, and we're all sat there with Hal Leonard tab books trying to learn songs that we like. So I started playing guitar, and then but the sound really started to speak to me, and pedals. Yeah, it got ridiculous with pedals. And look, you think the Tower of Modular is bad, and got rid of a hell of a lot of it. And I've been in and out in bits, but that came from touring with bands. We were gigging, a couple of times a week. Not to drift too far away, I want to get back to Waveshapers, but I had and same thing for Modular. That I had a huge setup, got sick of trailing it around. Small setup, big setup, small setup. You then build a pedal board. You want to put a couple more pedals in, so they're sat on the floor, but the rest of the pedals are in a nice case. Yeah, similar issues. So it's something I'll explore in the future.
Yeah, pedals are definitely where I started, and we'll talk about that in the 4th episode, because it kind of is a bridge of where I am now.
Let's keep going with the modules, and I'll pull back to some questions. It's super underrated piece of kit, and I know I'll get flamed for saying mutable instruments are underrated. Of course, they're super well known and represented. But warps and streams, I think, are really underloved modules.
Yeah, I mean, this is an obvious utility infielder. American baseball talk there. Very flexible Waveshaper to have in the system. But this gets back to the discussion of cable management again. It's sitting in this row because it has 2 inputs, so it's right in the midst of all my oscillators to feed into it to go ahead and play around with different combinations.
Yeah, and effectively that would turn a single analog oscillator into a complex oscillator somewhat easily. You have 2 oscillators, you can then really kind of go to town with a thing. An additional modulation. Yeah. I nearly vocoded rather than pitch shift. I nearly vocoded through that this evening, but just didn't quite have time to set up a vocoder patch.
Yeah, I haven't played with a vocoder much in here. I used to use a vocoder all the time when I played with other people, and I miss not having that in my gigging case. How is the vocoder in it?
Really good. Really, really good. Used it on some female vocal pop production stuff. It stood up really well. Rich, nice, full, not huge amounts of control. You're not getting in like one of the hardware Roland units and physically moving sliders and frequency bands, but it.
Yeah, I used to have a Roland analog vocoder in my live rig back when I did stuff in the LA. Yeah,
but does the job well. Will do the kind of tighter percussion against the polysynth stuff really nicely.
Good. That's what I love.
Yeah.
That's where the vocoder and the disting falls down. There's not enough bands.
Question jumping back to power. Sorry, Bill Smith. I did see you ask this earlier and didn't bring it up. We won't get too far into power. Those that have joined us and curious, that you can go back to the other episodes.
There was an hour of it last Wednesday.
But this didn't come up last Wednesday, so the reason I want to bring that up. He'd still like to hear about floating power versus mains earth and interconnecting cases. He's been experiencing voltage drops that he doesn't completely understand. Any statement on that?
Every situation's different. There's going to be some situations where my blanket advice will not work. But in general, when I have multiple cases, I like to tie together their grounds as best as I can, like thick copper wire on spade lugs between the cases to make sure they're all working off the same reference.
Yeah, that's always been my take, to try and get everything grounded to the same thing as best I can. It tends to
otherwise, you touching both cases could throw things off.
Yeah.
Which is a cool glitch performance idea, but...
Couple of questions from
But-
Omri. Are you using rings more for processing or as a standalone voice? First question.
Yeah, we talked about that processing.
Yeah, processing. And what are you doing with the disting usually? Which algorithm specifically? You mentioned the sampler, I think.
Yeah, it's got a really sweet little through 0 FM oscillator that's in Mark 1 and Mark 2 as well. Does alias a bit at higher notes. I used that in the early days before I had a lot of modules. That would be my FM second oscillator, was disting. I go through the utilities quite a bit. I used to use its quantizer quite a bit. I used to use its precision adder quite a bit. Its filters and effects don't speak to me, but that's personal taste. But I've really fallen in love with it for being sample playback. So two of the distings in my performance case are for various forms of sample playback, one shot or looping, and the third disting is to be a pitch sample and hold because it is a rock solid pitch sample and hold, and that's hard to find.
Yeah. Heimbach, I've seen you post that here's a set of sound files comparing your modular through a high-end DI versus direct. You can't post links because you're not a moderator in the chat, but now you are. Heimbach, you can post web links in the chat.
Cool.
If you need to. And
yeah, I'm not dissing high-end mic pre's.
No.
But
not at all. And I know Heimbach is chasing that sound throughout the whole chain. And the sum of the parts is glorious in that regard.
And that was part of my problem early on using Ableton Live, is I just felt that adding some analog warmth downstream from Live really helped blend together the multiple chopped up digital audio streams, made it sound better.
Yeah. Can you recommend other modules to make the most of... Oh God, the live chat's just pinged way down. Let's... Sorry about this. I had it right where...
Then we're going to get onto wave folders.
Yeah, get onto wave folders. I'll find that question. I'll zip back up and find it.
If you were to buy only one wave folder, and I have more than one wave folder, Bastel Timber.
Yeah, I really, really need to get my head into it. I don't have one, so I need to buy one first, and then get my head into the thing.
It's lovely and flexible. It's both a saturator and a wave folder. The saturator has a fewer fold wave folder after it, or you can have it be a multi-fold wave folder, smooth turnarounds at the folds. The ones that have very spiky turnarounds tend to sound very hashy and bright.
Yeah.
The rubberier ones are the ones that have a nice smooth turnaround, and the Bastel does that. And it has a VCA, and it has a crossfader, and it's 7 HP, so it's going to drive some of you crazy. But if I only could have one in the case, and I don't, this is it, definitely.
Okay.
Neat.
Yeah, very nice. I am just pulling in a quick bit from Patch and Tweak on trying to make up an image here live. I'll pull it in. There we go. There are things on audio connections and levels and differences between Pro and Consumer Line and Modular in Patch and Tweak, which Kim and Chris co-wrote together.
Eurorack level down to...
Come back up.
Well, if you're doing it cleanly, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
What drives me crazy is watching the Ableton people showing off the CV tools using audio interfaces to hook up to their modular systems, and the levels are completely mismatched. And they're like they have beautiful preamps that they're massively overdriving to bring up to level. That is silly. But if you're doing it cleanly, then it's just level shifting. It's just math.
Yeah. I would absolutely, to the preamp thing, I would absolutely be chasing color if I was introducing them into my signal. If it's clean, I'd be happy with whatever was clean to attenuate or amplify. Absolutely. I found the question from Pascal V in the chat. Can you recommend other modules to make the most of the Verbos harmonic oscillator apart from Oct, although that is on his list? Anything like shift registers that you find interesting?
Modulation sources that have multiple outputs, particularly if they're coordinated. I've used like LB Chaotica or Chakwa with it and really enjoyed that. but also something that has multiple smoothly variable streams will create a lot of motion in the sound. It'll be like wavetable scanning. Or if you wanted to be rough wavetable scanning, then use stepped random. But the main thing is that you want at least two, preferably three or more different modulations to really make this come to life.
I would say a blend of smooth and stepped modulation. So even if you've got,
particularly if you were rhythmic with the step stuff,
yeah,
then that'd be really fun.
Even if you have an oct or multiple LFOs or anything like that, which of course oct is lovely, it's exactly what I wanted the thing to exist for, but it can be done other ways as well. Just multiple LFOs, but mixing something rhythmic in time with the sequence and something smooth.
Yeah, and that's when we talked about that Wednesday. That's why there's a dual sample and hold in this case, so I can take a smoothly varying LFO, etc., and enforce rhythmic steps onto it.
Yeah.
To be honest, there's another module that would be great that has both sample and hold and smooth random voltages. From that's basically the what's called the random from Berbers. It's like
Verbose Random, the SSF Ultra Random Analog,
That's
the
discontinued now, I think.
Sputnik West Coast Random, and of course Sapel from Frap Tools.
Or Pamela's new workout, or the Octo controller from Abstract Data. The thing that the Octo controller does incredibly well, if you have one, you can just make oct in it, because there's a quantize button for every channel. You just turn it off. You can free run everything. So you can very easily just go, it's not like looking at, this is my like digital tempo led modulation source, which is great at. You can just unquantize everything, really, or just some channels.
Yeah. I have an Octo controller, and it's been in and out and in and out and in and out of this case. I'm really torn about that. And when we get onto the modulation based modules, which I think is the 4th episode, we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
More wave folders?
Yeah, hit us with another one.
This is the one that I don't know if it's going to stay in the system, to be honest. It's the STG wave folder, and this is based off of I'm going to mispronounce his name, Jürgen Hebel?
Yeah, Jürgen Hebel. That's how I've always said that.
Yeah, it's based off of his wave folder circuit.
Yep.
This is another beautiful rubbery sounding one that also has an important offset control to make the waveform asymmetrical. Timbre has it as well.
Yep.
That adds some additional timbral changes, introduces even harmonics, adds more motion than just a normal wave folder. My test for wave folders can make a sawtooth sound interesting rather than just hashy, and this passes that test. When I got the timbre, I took this out. I happen to have the space, so I'm putting it back in. But how many Waveshapers do you need? I've got 4.
Yeah, but you've got 17 oscillators. Come on. A couple more questions. We can blast through a few quickly.
I'm screwing this in.
What/how do you use the NW1? We touched on it briefly, but not specifically. Is it kind of a bass machine for you? Is it mid voices? Is it everything? Is it good across the whole range? How do you use the NW1, the Waldorf?
It's more of a solo upfront main voice for me, because I like to do wave scanning and to modulate its other timbre controls. This is getting tricky to get my hand in that space. So I'll make it a hero. I come from 2 decades working in Hollywood, so I'm used to the concept of who is the hero in this scene. That's who the camera should be on. So I'm used to the terminology, who's the hero on this track? That's the one that should be up front in the mix. I'll use the NW1 as a hero, as a voice I want you listening to because it's doing interesting things. It can do really fun cutting basses and stuff like that, but that's how I happen to use it.
In your travel case, and this is maybe something we'll get into in future episodes because we're not doing any kind of logic and beats in this one. 2 more episodes to come, Wednesday at 7:30 UK time, 8:30 for Central Europe, and same again on Saturday next week. 4 episodes will close off this Feeding the Monster series. But quick question from Aussie Digi. Hello Aussie Digi, been in the last couple of streams. In your live case, you had a Logic module and breakout that you use in your percussion section with the Pamela's new workout and Euclidean V2. What was that, and has it made its way to the studio case?
I have an ANA module Logic as my Logic module that I use in my gigging case because it's very immediate. There's no modes, switches, knobs. I just plug into the inverter or 2 ands or 2 ORs or 2 flip-flops. So I find it great to just use live since it's so immediate and has LEDs and all the stages for feedback. this case, where I have more time to be thoughtful, I happen to have a plug from IntelliGel because it has more logic modes, but it takes more thought to get to those logic modes. On the other hand, plug lacks the inverter that's in logic object, so I added a Circuit Abbey Verti, and I also added an IntelliGel dual OR because just quite often the way I do beats, and we'll talk about that in a future episode, I tend to be mixing two trigger streams together to give me what I really want.
Yeah. What about utilities for oscillators like the Caltrans? Do you use it? We did speak, I don't know specifically the time, but earlier in this stream, if you've joined us, we spoke about the Clavis Caltrans and how that would vary.
Yeah, when I started putting modules in very early in the stream. Yeah, I have Caltrans in my gigging case. Love it. Might eventually replace the V-scales with a bunch of Caltranses, but then I'm going to need to find some more spare HP, which means the modules have to come out.
Yep. I'm still scanning the chat. Do keep questions coming as we come
Meanwhile,
to somewhat of an end.
I'm going to go to the original.
Oh, hang on.
The king.
No.
The fun wave shaper, the wave multipliers, the surge wave multipliers.
Let's go back to the...
Ben's pulling up.
Let's go back to this.
Is that your 7375?
Yeah, I mean, it's a modern remake, but if we're going to go original, let's go 70s original.
Hey, Surge is working with the folks
Yes,
at
he is.
RS.
Officially working with Random Source, which is amazing.
He designed the new ring mod and things like that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I just love this. It has a lovely sounding wavefolder. It has a nice sounding rectifier. It has a VCA with a lovely saturation on it, all voltage controlled. You know, you talk about 3-module challenge. My 2-module challenge is a Surge dual universal slope generator and one of these. You could make a voice out of that, a very nice voice.
Just a dual universal slope and be done.
Well, this will give
of
you
course, gives you a hell of a lot more.
a VCA, and it'll give you wave shaping that you could use one of the sides of the universal slope to envelope. I mean, the two of them together, you've got a synth voice.
Feedback wave shape the oscillator out of the wave shaper. Yep, tons of cool stuff.
Yeah. Now, as Kim will know, I sold him one of these because when I got the timbre, I thought, I don't need it anymore, and I need to save space. And Kim wants to get into Surge, so I'll sell him a bunch of my RS stuff. And then I bought another one back because I missed it.
How are you finding it then, Kim?
That's the funny thing. I've actually sold it again.
Okay.
Because at some point, I just felt I was trying to grasp too much.
Yeah.
At
Yes.
once.
I think that's important to
So I'm trying to
recognize.
focus on this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to focus on less right now, and also with getting into the pedal stuff. And I just needed fewer options, basically. And I'm focused a lot on smaller cases. So for me, it's all about also space.
Yeah. Yeah, the random source modules are more ergonomic, which is a nice way of saying they're larger. And Surge is a mindset,
It is, absolutely.
particularly that 7375 you have. Now, that's a challenge.
Yeah. To the point of being a bit of a dog to work with sometimes. But,
Yeah.
many people like dogs, although we have cats on synths. Quick question again. There's quite a few, so we'll blast through some quickly.
Sure.
Anthony Neal says, this may be a stupid question. Absolutely not. Completely valid. Do analog folders sound better or different in any way to digital?
Well,
different, yes. Better, hard to say.
both of them can sound good and both of them can sound bad. The secret in a wave folder for me is what does it do when it reflects the wave? If it's a harsh reflection, a very sharp bend, it's going to produce more high harmonics and therefore be more likely to sound very hashy and noisy with complex waveforms. If, however, it has a rounding to the bend when it reflects the wave, it's going to have more lower harmonics, not as hashy, will work with a wider variety of waveforms. You can design an analog circuit to do either one, and you can design a digital circuit to do either one. Most of the digital ones I've encountered have the sharp turnaround because it's faster, it's easier to code, it executes faster just to make it negative rather than positive. Putting in that curve requires a lot of math or a lookup table. So in general, you'll notice I have a bunch of analog wave folders with the exception of warps. but it's not flatly one or the other. It's how it's designed.
Yeah, I'm being hit by a page of wave folders from Kim. I'll pull. In fact, let me pull one more question for you, Chris. While I pull that into OBS to show people.
Okay. We'll multitask here.
ZXZZZC Not quite that many, but
say that
but
5
not
times
that
fast.
far off. Question to Chris and I: what else from Bastel instruments? Same to you as well, Kim. If you've had experience with Bastel, I must go to modules besides the timber.
Kim, I think you have a few of the Bastles you particularly like, don't you?
You're muted, Kim.
I was muted again. I have the
just being
sampling
thoughtful.
module with the expander, which I like a lot because of the whole
Grandpa?
lo-fi, I think. Yeah, the Grandpa. Bastel and was it the Spa also. That's what I like because you get a lot of some of that granular stuff basically in a very low HP.
Yeah.
So for like a traveling case, it's nice.
I have their Chow output module, and I've been very interested in the cinnamon filter because I like state variable 2-pole filters. But also, there's several other interesting ones like skis and stuff like that. I happen to have enough VCAs, so I haven't really looked hard at those. But if I was starting over building a compact case, they put a lot of functionality in pretty small modules.
Skis was going to be one that I mentioned. 2 decay envelopes, 2 VCAs can be used independently, entirely separately from each other. Small space, but not cramped. It's a nice design. Is it the ABC, the little 6-channel mixer? I guess a lot of use just for cramming in a good mixer in a small size. Next question from Tunatic, I think it is. Not got into Wavetape.
Not Lunatic?
No, there's a T. I've not got into wave folders. What do they bring that I can't get from, say, a Pico, A-Logic, Sum Difference, Min and Max, and other utilities?
Yeah. Waveshapers, taking a waveform in and spitting a different waveform out. Yeah. And that's the roots of synthesis. We started with these test machine waveforms, squares, sols, sines, and we tried to come up with something more interesting. So we just came up with all these weird-ass circuits to bend them into different things. Wave folders are something that are very West Coast oriented, where they tended to start with more harmonically pure sounds, like triangles or sines, and then could add harmonics with, say, a short enveloped blip to them. So wave folders take a waveform and then reflect it back on itself multiple times, adding more high harmonics. And actually the tuning of the high harmonics depends on how many folds there are. And you can envelope that, so you can, it's almost like sync, where you can sweep through these different harmonics. Yeah. So it adds a lovely bit of animated pluck or twang, rubbery sound. Can also be used in just droning stuff, but I like more for adding plucks and twangs. And they're not as harsh. Good ones, good analog ones, can be more rubbery sounding than just adding a lot of hard edges.
Yep, I like them on kick drums. Not to do like hard folded gabba kicks, but just usually with an envelope to it, so it just brings it in right on the transient, but just a good soft fold into a folder on the front end of a kick is really good for getting that like click of the kind of batterhead mic on a bass drum. Really nice. Yeah. Great page in Patch and Tweak about wave folding. There's a lot about all of this in Patch and Tweak that is well worth a read. An absolute pleasure and honor to be featured in it, but that is entirely Kim and Chris's work. Well, and others, but it's certainly nothing to do with me. I'm just very happy to share the good work, and it's still something I really enjoy. My only criticism of it the last stream was it's just not light enough to throw in my travel bag. But you almost
you're not the only one complaining about that.
But it's almost an emotional weight. I almost don't want to carry that much information around.
Oh, come on, Ben, you're a big strapping lad. You can put in something like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I just talked about, actually, in the Waveshaper Wavefolder section, that's in Patch and Tweak.
Yeah.
That's my brain dump of where this stuff came from.
I didn't catch who.
Another question, or can I get back to this quickly?
Another one, because it's back to folders before we move on. I didn't catch the name because the chat flew down again. But why so many wave folders? I would say it's not my case, but relative to the amount of potential voices, it's a small number. And
Yeah.
also, I know you're using them in different ways. It's sometimes that transient on the front end, it's sometimes the whole makeup of the tonal changes, the fold. But of course, the question for you, Chris, why so many folders?
The reason I have several wave folders is the same reason I have like 20 odd filters. Not because I want 4 identical wave folders, but I want 4 different sounding wave folders. So I'm choosing them because they sound different from each other and give me different sonic choices. Truthfully, I'm probably going to slim down by one of these, because I've got a few, but they're each chosen because they each have a different sonic character, and that's why these choices are in here. I don't have 3 of one thing, except for unless maybe disting, because I want each one to give me a different sonic option. That's why.
Yep. Very quick one to just round off questions just for a second. Any passive filter banks in Eurorack? And they tagged Heimbach at this. The Brulenkier 1613 and others have very kind of famously shot up in price with Heimbach's effort. I don't know if any passive filter. The filter bank, if you're thinking of the 1613 Brulenkier, it's a band pass. It's not a full bank like a Moog filter bank with lots of bands, or the AGH. Or you can get somewhat close with normal band pass filters. And you can, I think, not to talk down to the test equipment thing, it's very different in many ways, in approach, in sound. But I've been pinging filters, or at least trying to remember to, and I know you have as well, Chris, every filter I demo I try to ping, which is a very big thing in the test equipment world. So I'm trying to kind of get these techniques into Eurorack, and hopefully that shows you maybe an easier way to get some of the flavour with what you have, or an easier way to get it than getting hold of test equipment. But I don't know of any passive filter banks, or even just passive bandpass filters.
I have a really vague memory from like when I started looking at modulars back around 2015, when I started coming back in. I went to the Analog Haven website and looked at the page for every single module that they had, because that was what was available back then. And you could actually know what all the modules are compared to now. And I have a recollection that there was at least one passive bandpass in there, if not 2. One just capacitors, one maybe they had inductors, but we're talking old school stuff that's not really common. The companies are probably out of business, things like that.
Cool. Let's get back to it. That kind of rounds the chat. Do keep questions coming. I'm trying to monitor them, but you carry on, Chris.
Yeah. I had this ambitious plan of also like going through the chat and answering all the questions on my Patreon feed at some point. We'll see how long that takes me. The one thing I don't like about a lot of the surge and Buchla recreations in Eurorack, including the random source surge recreations, is the Buchla surges worked at a lower audio level than control voltage level. They tended to be more between line level and maybe plus 4 dBu, whereas Eurorack level is several times higher. And that's the case with the wave multipliers. The VCA starts saturating around plus or minus 1 volt.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff starts folding at before plus or minus 2 volts, which does not match up with the typical oscillator, which is plus or minus 5. You put 2 oscillators together, you're at 10. So right next to the wave multipliers, joined at the hip, is a FRAP 321 mixer. Because not only is it a brilliant utility mixer, doing offsets, inversions, things like that, it also can boost the signal by ×2 in addition to attenuate it. So I put it right next to the wave multipliers so I can loop things around, cut the signal down, go into wave multipliers, come back out, if necessary, cascade it through 2 things to get it back up to Eurorack level, then continue on to the rest of the system.
Yeah, it's a real shame because it allows you to push the unit further than in the original systems, but it definitely taints the experience, I think. It takes the finesse and the control and the fine control out when you're already hitting it way too hard by just plugging a normal signal in. We spoke, I think, either at the start of the stream or before we went live, potentially earlier today, about AJH Simpson, the mini-mod system. Those circuits...
Yes, that was before we went live,
Those circuits run at 3.3 volts internally, and Alan thought that was important. But so what that means is every input and output stage is attenuated and amplified according to Eurorack standards. So there isn't any of this experience of, oh, the output is quiet, or I'm driving the filter just with a normal wave, you know, it's too hot. So that's all handled really nicely in there. I've not experienced...
I think that's extraordinarily important that he does that. I wish the Surge and Buchla recreations did that.
Yeah, I've not had enough experience with the Eurorack Surge to pass much comment other than it's a shame it takes an amount of control away from you, just plugging a normal signal in.
Yeah. And that is a big issue in general to mastering your modular, is managing signal levels. A lot of people just patch without playing with attenuators. They turn everything up full blast. But the real subtlety in getting different tones is in playing with different signal levels, how hard you're driving things. There's a whole world of different sounds. The wave multipliers sounds really bang, bang. If you hit a Eurorack level into it, you attenuate it, it's like wobble.
Yeah.
It's a completely different module just by attenuating what's going through it.
Yeah. Well, we are around the third hour. We set about doing 4 2-hour streams, but we're also very close to you kind of completing this section.
We're very close, and then you know me, I'm a train's run on time. So we're going to go through the remaining things pretty quickly, I promise. VCAs, you can never have enough VCAs. This happens to be a Happy Nerding 3X VCA because it does some very nice things with bipolar attenuators, inverters, cascading. But the main thing is I have a VCA section, and I have a custom cabinet of 14 additional VCAs, but I wanted to have VCAs right here in the middle of my oscillators so that I could play around with dynamic FM, things like that.
Yeah.
Take the output of one oscillator, envelope it, controlling its level with a VCA, and feeding it to another oscillator. So I need VCAs in the middle of these oscillators to allow me to manage one modulating another one.
Yep, absolutely. Mixers as well, I find, which you are doing. You're dropping bits of mixing opportunity around. And maybe that goes to answering Constantine's question earlier about, do you not get into too much of a kind of like corner mentality of, now I'm in oscillator corner, now I'm in filter corner. I think the dotting of the utility stuff around helps that, because it helps to facilitate, as you say, being dynamic with modulation, because there's a VCA right there to go between two sources.
Yeah, the reason I do that is just because I probably have undiagnosed attention deficit disorder. So I like to have this mental image of, I need an oscillator, I need a filter. Go there, now start looking at the detail. You know, where's the forest? Found the forest. Now let's look at trees. I don't want to go look for a tree in between buildings. I want to say, I need another oscillator. Here's my oscillators. All right. It allows me to work faster. It's not necessarily the way other people want to work.
Of course. It's an interesting take on, and I've had my system set that way. They're not particularly at the minute, at least the bigger system here, of by function. And what it did do for me, interestingly, was it made me use things I hadn't for a while, because, as you said, the mindset was, I need an oscillator here. And there were several oscillators, maybe not the one I would always gravitate towards, and because it was there in front of me, powered on, ready to go, it would get that bit more use, and then that helps to decide whether it's for me or not, rather than it maybe living in a box under a table, kind of going, I should sell that thing, but it's kind of cool, maybe I shouldn't sell it, and back in and forth.
Yeah.
It definitely helped.
Yeah, it's just a way for me to manage how I get around the system by grouping stuff together. It's not like I'm lost in oscillator land. It just allows me to say, don't I have another filter somewhere in here? I just don't want to go through that. I want to know, there's my choices. Okay, which one? It's going to work for this patch. An essential utility module for people like Ben and myself.
I need a fourth.
I'm looking at getting a third one.
Yeah.
Data. It does a lot of stuff. It can do clocking. It can be an oscillator. You can check pitches with it. It can be a voltage source. You can read voltages with it. Just the 4 overlaid oscilloscope displays helps me figure out modules. When I get a new module in, the first thing I do is run a signal through this to the module, from the module back through this, overlay the two traces, and say, what is that module doing to the signal? That's how I learn every module. It's just essential for me.
Yep. The XY mode has been just eye candy mode for my videos for a while. When you don't need to see a wave, it's like, right, I'll just run the output against I don't know, an LFO or a sign or something, and I'll just let it paint pretty pictures.
Yeah.
A good question, and one that we could maybe stream the full length of this stream, just going back and forth on. Why are so many manuals not clear about the level of the modules? And that's from Space Between, or the leveling and signals they want. We could get into why don't manuals exist? Why are some, even if we weren't to get into that kind of territory, some of them are wrote very artistically, and that speaks to certain people. Some manuals are super technical, and that speaks to certain people. Yeah. It's a hard thing to crack, but I'm not sure why, without getting into judging people effectively, why manuals aren't clear about it.
I used to be pretty harsh about this. I'm a little more sympathetic now.
Yeah.
Most of these companies are really small.
Yeah.
1 to a couple people are trying to do everything. And it means they don't have time to test and use their equipment with everybody else's modules. So it's really easy to fall into a thing of, well, it works with everything else I have, which I built and designed the same way.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't occur to them that it may not work with someone else's modules. And it's not because they're callous, unthinking people. It's because they're just too busy to go buy everyone else's modules and test it with everything else. So they just don't even think that it's a necessary issue to put in their manuals. What are your levels? Things like that.
But yeah, gain staging.
That's my theory today.
It's the classic studio thing, isn't it? Learning gain staging will prove useful throughout all of your audio experience in and out of modular. Do you have a data, Kim?
No, and I'm wondering all the time if I should get one. And it seems like what's interesting, I think, is that it seems like it's almost the only choice in this type of module. Is that right?
No, there's several choices. There are smaller choices. O'Toole.
Yeah.
There's a 1U version that's made by VPDE. But there tend to be 2 traces, not the 4 traces that the data is.
Yeah.
But you say you use the scope in VCOrack as a complement to your system.
Yeah, I find that useful, definitely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Use that a lot when tracking visuals for patch and tweak, actually.
Yeah, a nice analog scope is a nice thing as well. I've never gone into any effort with the analog scopes I've had and have here of getting them in any way calibrated. I'll just take a junky old analog scope. It's like, yep, looks cool. Done. As long as I know that the waves are pretty much what they look like. I'm not trying to calibrate ranges or anything. But I can see a mixer there, Chris. This is cheating. This is like the next episode.
No, this is essential. This is one of the first modules I bought. It's a low gain submix. And the reason it goes here is it is my oscillator submixer. It's here in the middle of everybody, so I can bring all the oscillators in for my different voices, because it has several different subgroups inside of it that can be combined or taken individually. Yep. This is my grand central station that all the oscillators and Waveshapers come into, mix together, level tweak, and then they go out to the filters.
Yep. There's some love for DDope for his manuals. Constantine saying there's lots of hidden knowledge.
Oh yeah, Dopeford manuals are very educational.
Well worth reading, absolutely. Any Metasonic modules going into this monster?
Yes.
Simple answer. I thought you'd reach down to grab it then, like, hey, I've got 2 yellow modules by my feet. I'll drop the modular grid link in again, and people can find them to see what's coming up. I can see which one it is.
I need to point out a weakness. I've painted myself into a corner where I would probably patch this module into this bus board, but I've completely covered it up now.
Do it later.
So I need to go across here, which I might do, or I might take some of these out while you're gone and run the power back over.
Yeah, of course.
That's today's modules, folks.
Yep, that's good, because we could have powered through in a couple of hours potentially, but as I said, I like that it's not super serious. We did this with the intent of sharing Chris's knowledge along the way, and our ideas and bringing the live chat in, but it's a very open hangout as well. So I'm glad we've got to a completed state. Nothing
pretty lights.
Yeah, nothing frying. Everything looks like it's on.
No, I don't smell anything. Now, they do say that a symptom of coronavirus is losing your smell, but fortunately, I'm asymptomatic and I don't smell any circuitry burning. So
So again, not super final, like we're about to end exactly this second, but let's sort of kind of last call for chat stuff, because there is a bit of a delay. Kim and I will watch it. Any links you would like, Kim or I can drop them in. One thing I would like to share that I have already shared, but it's well worth a look, even just on your screen, for a flick through for eye candy. The free preview of all the books from Bukes, Push Turn Move, Patch and Tweak, and Pedal Crush. Each one well worthy of grabbing and having a good read through. Patch and Tweak certainly with Kim and Chris together is a real kind of powerhouse of information, patch ideas, artistic inspiration, historical knowledge, where a kind of modern document of where modern Eurorack is. It's a really impressive bit of work.
Thanks, Ben. I think it also showcases Chris's very methodological. I don't know what's called. It's methodology. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Story that I have any knowledge is a myth.
It's very systematic. Systematic would be the right word.
Yeah. So between patch and tweak, notice, by the way, the case is on. I'm not putting my hand in here. The power is on. Now my hands do not rest against the power supply. Yep. Yeah, between patch and tweak, which was a real brain dump. I joked that it was like Kim was drilling a hole in a different section of my brain every week and draining that out. And that was another chapter, and we go on. That and my website, learningmodular.com. I have got courses, but also I have a learning modular, a modular synthesis glossary up there. Yep. If there's terms that are unfamiliar to you. Useful. And a lot of other articles. How do you compare different forms of FM? How do you compare linear versus exponential VCAs or envelopes? A bunch of articles like that on the website as well. So I try to make learningmodular.com a real resource in addition to offering courses on this stuff.
The glossary is really useful. Definitely really useful. Exactly there. AR. What's an AR? There you go. There's your answer.
Yeah.
One thing as well, your Patreon page. If you'd like to support Chris, if you'd like posts on all the power experiments that he's been running, seeing the scope shots. Sorry if it's a bit disorientating flying through this. I'm trying to find one. I'm not going to see it there exactly, but historical things, very worthwhile to do so, to support on there and check out those posts. You support what I'm doing on Patreon as well, if you wish. That would be very much appreciated. It certainly helps at the minute doing this kind of thing and just kind of keeps everything going. I don't need to get too soppy about supporting people at the minute, but it would be very much appreciated. Bonus extras if you do, stems, audio, bits of music, added patch notes to patches from videos and things like that. The isolation streams is something that I really want to push. This is growing into a really kind of serious resource and getting some good clicks at this stage. The short link is bit.ly/Corona streams. I'll drop that in the live chat. Corona streams, and I'm updating this every day or so with what's coming up from friends and friends of friends, kind of related people in the scene, and ongoing live streams on there as well, things that are happening regularly, and some of the highlights from things that have come and gone as well. Check my messages on Patreon. Okay, HR Terror, I will do that. Thank you for the reminder. But yes, we've still got a little bit of time for chats.
Oh yeah, I did want to mention something for the hardy souls who have made it all the way to the end of this webcast. I've been spending a lot of time last few weeks building up a new training site and making some more offerings, including a free course and some basic concepts of synthesis there. But also, if there's a course that strikes your fancy, when you check out, enter the coupon code MONSTER in all caps, and you'll get 25% off any of the courses up there as well. So if you just go to learningmodular.com, that already has a description of all the courses, and just jump off to one that might catch your fancy, or sign up for the free one, the basic concepts, that I recorded as a companion for Patch and Tweak. And it cross-references what page in Patch and Tweak do we go into more detail on those subjects.
Yep. Cheers to Peter. It's another great session, lots of knowledge, useful tips. Yeah, it's great. It's great to be sat amongst everyone in the live chat here. Okay. And I think, let's do a last call for the chat. What are we
Today was the most difficult day, by the way. That was the most stuff to slog through. So I think there's hope for the last two episodes.
Yeah. You can join us this coming Wednesday, again 7:30 in the UK. It's 8:30 in Europe. That's what for you, Chris? In what time zone?
It's 12:30 in Mountain, which means it's 2:30 East Coast, 11:30 West Coast Pacific.
Yep, Wednesday, and then again same on Saturday. And the third episode is what? Are we moving on to filters?
Yeah, we're doing filters and VCAs,
Okay.
including crossfaders and some other variations on VCAs.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
That's gonna be great.
Cool. Excellent. I'm just going to hold out for a minute for the delay in the live chat and just see
Yeah,
what
certainly.
it says. Earlier I mentioned that learning gain staging is hugely important. Do I have any references or links into that? Even regardless of any links or references, adding an attenuator, or as Chris says, a mixer attenuator amplifier that can bring a signal up as well as just bring it down, between patch points is how I really learnt it in modular. There wasn't much of a resource at the time, but someone just said, look, put an attenuator or an amplifier if you've got one between everything and see how it responds. So instead of taking, say, a saw wave from my oscillator straight into a filter that maybe doesn't have an input level, I'd run it through a VCA first and just manually change its level. Is the VCA really nicely saturating, but sometimes I want to back it off? Does it need a push if I could amplify it? That's kind of how I tried to do it and just figure out modules that way. But what about you, Kim or Chris? Any tips on kind of gain staging?
Yeah, I agree. Utility mixer in front of the filter or in front of a Waveshaper will open up new worlds. I'll just spend time. Does it sound any different when I turn down the level? How does it sound when I turn it up? How does it sound when I boost the level and go beyond? There's some filters that when you put them into resonance in particular, over cranking the input really puts them into a whole new territory, which is a lot of fun to play with, for example. And a lot of my videos are based around, let's see what it does when we overdrive it. Oh, did you want it to sound clean? This is what you're going to need to do. Things like that.
Yeah. What about you, Kim? How have you kind of approached gain staging in modular?
Yeah, definitely. I've learned some of that stuff from Chris. Yeah, who does? But I mean, the happy nerding. I like the happy nerding stuff. I had the VCA, but also the Mia mixer. That's what I'm using.
Particularly high quality one, that the mixer inverter attenuator, the Mia. John Lawfink of Genus Modu, who's like a real fidelity in modular fanatic, really likes that one.
Yeah. I'm posting the link to the next stream on Wednesday in the chat for anyone who wants to bookmark, but it is just on this channel. You could just put DivKid in YouTube, you'll find the ugly little orange face. that is DivKid.
Yeah, if you don't see it on the home page, go to the videos tab for DivKid's YouTube stream, and then you'll find it.
I think
I mean, it's everyone has a tab open with Ben's channel all the time. That's what I have.
There are well over 1,000 videos. Someone said, hey, I'm going to go through like all your back catalogue. I was like, no, you're not.
Good luck.
Really
Good luck
love the
with
sentiment. Yeah, no, you're not.
but it'd be a worthwhile endeavor. I mean, when I got back into modular, Ben's videos are the ones that connected with me. I said, this guy knows what's going on in the modular, and he knows music. This is the person I need to connect with as I get back into this world. So it's a worthwhile endeavor, even if it would take you the rest of your life.
Interesting point from Quantum Space, who does support on Patreon, so thank you very much. But he's saying I should allow contributions right here in the chat. I think you can, unless I have it off deliberately and don't know, but I think there is a super chat when you're typing. I mean, I'm not saying someone throw me $1 and check, but I think you can hit the button and then just don't go through with it. He says he doesn't see it. Yeah, I mean, if people feel like... That's an interesting point, and maybe one to leave in the comments for another chat, but if people feel like super chats, PayPal donations, one-off little kind of, hey, this was cool, chuck a bit of support, is that more relevant than Patreon for you? Is Patreon a platform you're not interested in, or you're not interested in it being monthly? Be interested. We're all trying to find our feet and support ourselves with this stuff. So...
I appreciate the tip jar concept, but really the better deal for you, if you want to tip me $1 or $5, go throw it on my Patreon channel and join for 1 month and read my back catalog of posts there. You'll get more out of it.
That's what I would say. If you want to do it, join, take all my files down from my private Google Drive and leave. If you really want, get something for it. That's cool. Omri says super chat's not active. I can activate it. I do see a lot of streams, people throwing bits in, and that's really cool that people want to support. Thanks for the reminder. yeah, Colin Benders, you regularly see people like, this is wicked, take my money, which is cool. I will make a note to enable super chat.
I mean, someone has to pay for all those bottles of single malt.
Yeah, those things.
But I mean, if people buy your module, Ben, your modules, or if they buy Patch and Tweak or the courses, they get really value for money.
Yeah,
I
that's
think.
the real way to support
Great
us
way
all.
of supporting too.
Yeah.
Grab an Oct when they come back out. Try Mutes if you like Mutes. Grab new things that are coming soon. May have been alluded to earlier, maybe 4HP. One of them isn't.
Same
Yeah,
HP.
There's a new brand, 4HP. Is 2HP now got a mega brand called 4HP?
yeah, new things are coming. Get something for the money, whether it's rinsing Patreon for kind of content or books and things. Great. I think that is it for the channel. I'm just scanning through the chat. I think that is it.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you watching and the really cool questions.
If people,
Thanks for hanging in.
what kind of monster patch can I make? It's too, the intelligibility of that's not good enough. I wanted a monster voice that I could talk through. Maybe it's too low pitched. Tips on Eurorack vocal processing to feed the monster for my. I'm quite happy with the PT delay. I really like the sweep and how noisy it gets. The PT delay from Bafako is wicked. The crush delay, I'm really happy with that. The reverb's a bit too washed and quiet, and this monster sound just isn't. Tips for next time. Anyone curious or just totally offended by my ridiculous Eurorack processing is totally welcome. Cool. Check out the Corona streams. Enjoy some other streams. Last night when I finished with Finley Future Sound Systems, there was a video synthesis stream that started pretty much straight after.
Cool.
Which I'd like to check out. I'm very curious about the LZX world. Great. Thank you for Chris, Kim, the live chat. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
That's
Ben.
great.
Thank you, everyone.
And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.